our overworked barrier mage Blake is humanity's last hope after the hero gets completely annihilated, forcing 100 desperate mages to pool their magic and seal off the entire demon realm, though every subsequent hero sent to finish the job just ended up in a graveyard. Fast forward 30 years later to a quiet, isolated mountain range where our story truly begins, introducing Blake, a highly relatable 39-year-old magic user who just wants a decent night's sleep. But instead he has to drag his aching body out of bed for another shift, stepping outside his cozy little cabin to face the daily grind of saving the world. Chewing on a piece of bread, he casually greets his incredibly hostile neighbors, who happen to be a horde of terrifying monsters and clawing at the magical boundary. And noticing that the protective shield is starting to look dangerously thin today, he drops to his knees to channel his own mana directly into the ground, igniting a massive glowing circle that forces the beasts back into the shadows. Even though he successfully reinforces the seal, the constant drain is clearly taking its toll, especially since the barrier has been decaying much faster and demanding way more power lately, leaving him praying that some legendary new savior will finally show up and end this. Deep inside the Dark Castle, a brave female warrior actually confronts the terrifying overlord, wasting absolutely no time as she charges forward across the polished floor with incredible speed, unleashing a blinding burst of energy as their weapons collide in a massive shockwave, screaming a fierce battle cry while pouring every ounce of her strength into the strike, locking eyes with her monstrous foe in a desperate duel that will decide humanity's fate. This brave female warrior delivers a decisive blow, slicing right through the terrifying demon lord, who stands there coughing up blood in absolute disbelief that he actually lost the battle, cursing her name as his massive body collapses onto the cold stone floor. She raises her sword high in the air, declaring a glorious victory for all humanity. A massive pillar of light erupts from the dark castle, signaling the end of the war, which immediately catches Blake's attention as he stares at the sky in complete shock, wondering if the legendary heroes have finally managed to defeat the Demon King once and for all, especially since the toxic green miasma is suddenly starting to clear up around him, as he finds himself standing in a beautiful green field he hasn't seen in decades. Our overworked mage can't help but smile, realizing the world is finally at peace, and he starts daydreaming about whatever massive reward the kingdom will give him for his service, looking forward to a long, peaceful retirement under a bright blue sky. Fast forward 1 month later, a group of armed soldiers suddenly shows up at his cabin where their obnoxious leader points a finger, rudely declaring that Blake is no longer needed, leaving our poor protagonist completely baffled as he tries to process the sudden eviction. This angry soldier accuses him of being a money-grubbing fraud who wasted public funds on a useless barrier, prompting Blake to desperately explain that his barrier was the only thing keeping the monsters at bay. But the arrogant knight just waves his hand, dismissing him as an incompetent bottom-tier nobody, physically shoving him aside while demanding he pack up his things and get off state property, forcing our tired hero to quietly walk away with his meager belongings as they raid his home. Devastated by the sudden betrayal, Blake can only sigh over 30 years of wasted dedication, leaving him with no choice but to head back to his quiet childhood village. Soon he arrives at the local adventurers guild in the rural town of Hatino, only to be offered a pathetic handful of copper coins for his hard work, prompting our boy to politely point out that the reward is way too small, which immediately triggers a furious glare from the terrifyingly hostile guild receptionist. She slams the desk, screaming at him to stop complaining about his useless class, leaving him wondering if his life-saving barrier was actually just a joke to everyone. This very next day, he swallows his pride and walks back into the guild, desperately begging for literally any quest, regardless of how terrible the pay is. But the grumpy old lady coldly shuts him down, claiming nobody wants barrier mages. Even when he offers to do basic weeding, she insists there is absolutely nothing, while a couple of arrogant rookies laugh hysterically at his bottom-tier magic class, standing there in complete silence as he realizes just how hopeless his situation is. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors of the guild are kicked wide open, revealing a heavily armored royal knight, demanding to know if Blake is inside, which instantly shocks the smug rookies who assume the old man is in trouble. Raising his hand nervously, our tired protagonist slowly steps forward to identify himself, meeting the intense, unwavering gaze of the elite soldier standing before him, leaving him sweating bullets as he wonders what the kingdom wants with him now. This knight explains that they are heading to the royal capital on Hero Alice's direct orders, which absolutely blows the minds of the smug rookies who just finished mocking him, leaving Blake with no choice but to agree as they prepare to leave immediately, ushering our tired protagonist toward a surprisingly luxurious carriage waiting just outside the guild. Meanwhile, the rude receptionist and her smug buddies are left sweating bullets over their massive mistake, while the carriage speeds down the road carrying Blake toward an unexpected new chapter, though he can't help but feel completely out of place inside such fancy transport, wondering why on earth a legendary hero would suddenly want to meet him, until he remembers a time he saved a young girl near the demon realm years ago. Soon they arrive at the bustling royal capital of Mistin, a massive and prosperous city, making our rural mage completely awestruck by the sheer number of people walking around, as the carriage crosses the Grand Bridge and heads straight toward the royal palace, where he is escorted through massive golden hallways that make him feel even more awkward. Suddenly, a cheerful voice echoes through the corridor, instantly catching our tired hero off guard. revealing the legendary hero Alice herself, who runs up to greet him with pure excitement, eagerly asking if he remembers the time he saved her life near the demon realm. And she practically beams with joy when he confirms that he absolutely remembers her, thanking him profusely for rescuing her back when she was separated from her party. Our humble protagonist just scratches his head, downplaying his incredible feat with a polite smile. With Alice apologizing that her other companions are currently too busy with royal ceremonies to join, Alice excitedly asks Blake about his next career move, assuming a legendary barrier mage is in high demand. But our tired hero just laughs awkwardly, hiding the painful truth that he is currently completely unemployed, prompting the enthusiastic hero to suggest he immediately join the prestigious Royal Magician Corps instead. This idea is instantly shut down by Gunther, a smug vice captain who looks down on barrier mages, though Alice quickly steps in to defend Blake, arguing that his barrier kept humanity safe for decades, only for the arrogant noble to claim the monsters were just too scared of real magicians to attack. He confidently declares that barriers are completely useless, dismissing 30 years of Blake's hard work as utterly redundant, leaving our poor protagonist to silently realize just how much his profession has been devalued over time. Clenching his fist in quiet frustration, Blake struggles to swallow his pride after sacrificing his entire youth, while Gunther continues to mock him, calling him a useless old man who doesn't belong here, and boldly claiming that the veteran mage possesses absolutely no actual combat skills to speak of. Hearing this, Alice gets a dangerous look in her eyes, asking if skills are all that matter, which the smug vice captain happily confirms, challenging Blake to a duel to prove his worth. This noble explains that a middle-aged recruit needs to show immediate results if he wants a job, walking away with a smirk while leaving our hesitant protagonist to decide his next move. Before Blake can back out, Alice looks at him with absolute confidence, declaring she knows he will win, sparking a sudden rare look of determination in the tired eyes of our overworked barrier mage. Soon the two men stand facing each other in a grand courtyard, surrounded by curious onlookers, though Blake can't help but wonder how a simple social visit escalated into an official duel, as his arrogant opponent smugly introduces himself, completely unaware of the legendary power he is about to face. Gunther immediately charges up a massive flame spell, screaming at Blake not to complain when he dies. Unleashing a giant fireball, the arrogant noble sends the blazing attack directly at our calm protagonist. A massive explosion rocks the courtyard, engulfing the entire area in a blinding flash of fire. Watching the blast, the other magicians instantly celebrate, assuming their vice captain won the duel effortlessly. This noble laughs hysterically, smugly declaring that this is what happens when a bottom-tier mage gets cocky. But his laughter quickly dies down as he senses something incredibly wrong amidst the clearing smoke, revealing Blake standing there completely untouched, casually wondering if the fight has even started yet. This crowd gasps in absolute disbelief, shocked that a simple barrier mage survived that devastating attack unscathed, while a sweating Gunther panics internally, unable to comprehend how his lethal spell failed so miserably. Refusing to accept reality, the noble claims he was just holding back and prepares to get serious, igniting an even larger sphere of raging flames to completely incinerate his opponent once and for all, which crashes violently against a glowing blue shield that Blake casually raises with a single hand, triggering another massive shockwave as the intense heat washes harmlessly over the impenetrable magical defense. Screaming like a lunatic, the desperate noble pours every ounce of his mana into the attack, leaving the onlookers sweating bullets as they worry the vice captain is taking this way too far, especially since the resulting explosion is powerful enough to level the entire courtyard in an instant. Safely inside his barrier, Blake actually looks incredibly bored, realizing his opponent's magic is surprisingly weak, genuinely wondering if the elite knight is still holding back because the attack feels so pathetic. As the thick dust finally begins to settle, revealing a panting Gunther who assumes he won, only to find our tired hero standing there completely fine, scratching his chin in absolute confusion. Sweating bullets, the arrogant noble tries to convince himself that his opponent is just a low-level nobody, pointing a trembling finger while screaming that a defense-only class is completely useless in a real fight, which prompts him to foolishly dare our quiet protagonist to actually try and land an attack. Hearing this, Blake casually raises his hand, politely agreeing to do exactly what was asked, leaving the smug vice captain completely bewildered by the old man's sudden confidence. Before the noble can even react, a solid blue barrier slams directly into his face, sending him tumbling backward across the hard stone courtyard like a discarded ragdoll, crashing violently into the dirt while coughing up a pathetic cry of pure agony. This sudden turn of events leaves the spectating magicians completely speechless, unable to process the absolute disrespect, while their battered leader struggles to his feet, screaming that barrier magic shouldn't be offensive. But our boy just casually spins a miniature magical shield on his fingertip like a basketball, explaining that he simply moved the barrier, which only makes the furious noble lose his mind further. Blake sheepishly scratches his head, admitting that 30 years of constant practice makes this trick pretty easy, though he genuinely wonders if moving a stationary defense spell counts as cheating in a duel, prompting the onlookers to whisper in hushed panic as they realize who the real monster is. Gritting his teeth, the humiliated noble refuses to accept that he is losing to a supposed nobody, deciding that his only option left is to completely eliminate Blake right here and now. He casts a desperate glance toward his subordinates, silently demanding their assistance to salvage his pride, who look back at him with nervous hesitation, fully aware of how bad this looks. Yet they still begin charging up their own spells, preparing to launch a cowardly group attack. Standing completely unfazed, our boy faces down the entire squad of cowardly magicians, who immediately unleash a massive wave of fire to incinerate him on the spot. But his automatic defense system kicks in, effortlessly neutralizing the raging inferno. This leaves the cheating spectators absolutely horrified while Alice just smiles in pure satisfaction. Our clueless protagonist casually scratches his head, wondering if a tiny pebble just hit him, which completely breaks the fragile ego of the sweating vice captain standing opposite him. As the noble screams in absolute denial while Blake remains completely lost in thought, Alice coldly steps in to warn the arrogant noble that his chances have officially run out, prompting the desperate man to charge up a forbidden level of destructive fire magic, determined to completely obliterate his opponent to save whatever dignity he has left, causing his own subordinates to panic as the sheer heat threatens to consume them too. Screaming like a total maniac, the noble unleashes his absolute maximum power directly at Blake, sending a colossal torrent of raging flames crashing down toward our quiet hero, who doesn't even flinch as the massive explosion forces everyone else to run for cover. While ordinary mages believe advanced magic is unstoppable, Alice knows exactly what Blake is capable of. Remembering the time he stood before a horde of terrifying demons to protect her, leaving her completely spellbound by the sheer majesty of his impenetrable defensive spells. Back then, he effortlessly shattered the monster's attacks with his legendary blue barrier shards. And now, those same glowing shields easily dispersed the massive inferno without a single scratch, instantly shattering the arrogant vice captain's sanity as his ultimate attack completely fails. Slumped on the stone floor, the defeated noble can only stare in absolute horror, sweating profusely as he realizes his absolute strongest magic did not even leave a scratch, while the stunned onlookers whisper in shock, realizing the legendary vice captain has officially run out of mana. Alice immediately steps forward to declare Blake the winner, proving he belongs in the elite corps, reminding the pathetic noble that our boy spent 30 years single-handedly protecting their entire world. But Gunther desperately tries to deflect, screaming for investigators to prove other mages helped him. A heavily armored knight steps up with the official report, delivering a devastating blow, revealing that there were actually no other barrier mages stationed at the border at all, since they had all either passed away or abandoned their posts while embezzling royal funds, leaving everyone to process the terrifying truth that Blake maintained the entire border completely alone. Our clueless protagonist finally connects the dots, realizing why his personal mana pool kept growing so massive, though the humiliated noble refuses to believe it, pointing out that the demon realm is absolutely massive, unable to comprehend how a single human could maintain a barrier larger than an entire kingdom. This hero just beams with pride, realizing her savior is even more ridiculously overpowered than she remembered, until a commanding voice suddenly echoes across the courtyard, instantly silencing the gossiping crowd, as the trembling vice captain looks up in sheer terror at the imposing presence approaching them. Recognizing the legendary red-haired captain who leads the first division of the Royal Magician Corps, a top-tier powerhouse that most ordinary mages only ever dream of seeing up close. This intimidating captain demands an immediate explanation for the chaotic mess in his courtyard, prompting Alice to happily explain how she recommended Blake, despite the vice captain's pathetic doubts. Alice explains that they were just conducting a practical test to prove Blake's incredible skills, and the intimidating captain wastes no time pointing out that the vice captain clearly lost the duel, prompting the humiliated noble to desperately claim he was just holding back against a mere barrier mage. This pathetic excuse is instantly shut down by the captain's terrifying glare, silencing the noble completely, leaving the defeated vice captain to swallow his pride while sweating in absolute terror, as the captain declares that anyone with actual talent is welcome to join their ranks, officially welcoming our shocked protagonist into the prestigious Royal Magician Corps right on the spot, while the spectating magicians whisper in disbelief about a barrier mage joining their elite group. Blake can't help but feel a sudden wave of imposter syndrome washing over him, genuinely wondering if a simple defensive specialist like him truly belongs in such a high-class place. But Alice quickly snaps him out of it, beaming with absolute joy and congratulating her savior. She happily suggests they immediately go grab some delicious food to celebrate his massive victory, only for the captain to suddenly loom behind her with a terrifyingly dark aura, ordering his subordinates to drag the protesting hero back to her official duties immediately. Turning his attention back to Blake, the captain curiously asks about his relationship with Alice, warning him that many clout chasers try to use the hero for their own personal gain, before walking away and leaving our quiet Protagonist standing alone under the watchful eye of Gunther. This humiliated noble glares with pure hatred, clearly plotting some sort of revenge against our hero. And a few days later, Blake receives an official letter that leaves him completely stunned. As he finally arrives at the massive castle-like dormitory of the Royal Magician Corps, Blake wanders through the massive dormitory hallway, carrying his gear while trying to locate his assigned room. But nearby trainees immediately start whispering, judging his shabby clothes and assuming he is just some random commoner. Feeling the awkward tension rising, our quiet hero decides to pick up the pace and find his door. Fortunately, he spots the brass plaque for room 206 just a few steps down the corridor. Opening the door with a polite smile, Blake steps inside to greet whoever he will be living with, only to be met by a spiky-haired teenager named Sven, who looks completely baffled by his arrival. Our protagonist introduces himself as the new roommate, leaving the 16-year-old trainee screaming internally in absolute confusion, screaming in disbelief when Blake claims he defeated the vice captain and got recommended by the hero. Blake can only smile sheepishly, admitting to himself that the whole story does sound incredibly fake to outsiders. Seeing his new roommate literally trembling in despair, our polite hero asks if the kid is all right. Sven dramatically clutches his head, wailing that his career is ruined by being paired with a liar, explaining that roommates are automatically placed on the same active team for the upcoming trainee division trials, which prompts Blake to apologize for his age, promising he will do his best not to hold them back. Softening up a bit, the young trainee reluctantly admits that it is not really the old man's fault, before pointing out Blake's messy hair and offering to give him a quick trim before training starts. Snapping the scissors with pride, Sven finishes the haircut, leaving our hero feeling incredibly refreshed and grateful. Suddenly, the realization of the time hits the young trainee, causing him to panic as training is starting, urging Blake to hurry up and change into his official uniform before they get left behind. Meanwhile, two other talented new recruits named Therese and Clara arrive at the training grounds, looking around expectantly, instantly whispering in confusion as they spot a mysterious old man standing right beside their peers. Blake politely introduces himself to his new teammates, who are already whispering about his age, prompting Therese to immediately freak out and complain about having an old guy on their team, though Clara tries to calm her down, only to get called out for thinking the exact same thing. Looking around at the crowd of youthful trainees, our quiet hero realizes he truly stands out. Suddenly, the instructor calls Blake up to the wooden stage, demanding he introduce himself to everyone, which he does with a polite smile, announcing his specialty as a simple barrier mage. This revelation instantly sparks a wave of skeptical whispers among the crowd about his rumored victory, as Clara stares in disbelief, highly doubting that an old man could defeat the vice captain, while Therese completely writes him off, convinced there is absolutely no way the rumors are true. Sven dramatically clutches his head in pure despair, crying that they are officially doomed with him. Meanwhile, a smug blonde trainee glares from the crowd, silently plotting to put Blake in his place. This instructor quickly silences the chatter, explaining that their official divisions have not been decided yet, making our protagonist realize he still needs to work hard and prove his actual worth. To determine their ranks, the instructor announces a 2-week survival exercise hunting monsters in Mecha Forest, sending the entire group of trainees into a panic over the forest's dangerous miasma pools. Laughing off the danger, the instructor tells Blake he is just unlucky and orders them to pack up, leaving a trembling Sven to pack his gear while lamenting that newbies should never go there, before begging our quiet hero to at least try not to hold the team back during training. With their gear ready, the recruits are ordered to board the massive dragon carriages by team. Unbeknownst to them, that same arrogant blonde trainee watches them depart, maliciously promising to show Blake absolute hell. Sven looks absolutely flabbergasted as he realizes exactly where their carriage dropped them off, while Blake remains completely unbothered by the sudden change in their training destination, looking out over a massive rugged mountain range that seems completely devoid of life, prompting the rest of the team to realize they definitely drew the short straw today, which immediately sends their young team leader into a spiral of absolute dramatic despair. Therese instantly snaps at him for being pathetic instead of actually leading their group, but their loud bickering is quickly interrupted when Blake politely tries to intervene, calmly suggesting they check their map first to determine their actual location in this wilderness, leaving the two hot-headed trainees to stare at him in awkward, silent disbelief. Spreading out the map, our legendary barrier mage easily points out their target destination and cheerfully asks if they should start hiking before they run out of daylight, forcing the reluctant teenagers to steel themselves and prepare for a grueling journey. Soon, the squad is forced to scramble over steep, jagged rocks in full gear, pushing through dense, overgrown foliage that makes every single step a massive chore, until the exhausted trainees begin to loudly complain about their incredibly heavy luggage. However, Sven notices that our overpowered protagonist is not even breaking a single sweat, leading them right to the edge of their destination just as they finally arrive, standing before the dark, ominous Mecha Forest as creepy purple miasma drifts through the trees. Although the toxic air is highly lethal to normal humans, their magic should protect them, allowing the team to focus on hunting down their target level 2 Komodo dragon. Blake casually asks about monster levels, sending his young roommate into an absolute spiral of disbelief, prompting Sven to smugly explain that monsters are ranked on a basic 10-tier scale of strength, which our polite protagonist genuinely appreciates, leaving the teenager feeling like an absolute genius. Suddenly, the girls call out from ahead, urging the slow duo to finally pick up the pace. with the four trainees marching deeper into the eerie, miasma-filled depths of the forest until a sudden rustling in the nearby bushes catches their immediate attention, revealing a small pack of red-eyed goblins armed with crude wooden clubs. This group halts in their tracks, sizing up the sudden threat blocking their path, while Sven and Clara immediately brace themselves to engage in their very first battle, facing down the wild beasts that are ready to tear them to shreds. Realizing these are only level 1 monsters, the overconfident teenager eagerly charges up a fire spell, unleashing a massive blast of flames while boasting that he can handle this fight completely alone, only to immediately panic when the remaining monsters launch a coordinated counterattack. Just as a heavy club is about to strike him down, sharp magical slashes slice through the air, thanks to Clara stepping in with her swift offensive magic to save her reckless teammate. Instead of being grateful, the bruised teenager pouts on the ground, grumbling about her interference, though Therese patiently heals his arm, reminding him that he actually got hurt, leaving Blake to watch this chaotic display of teenage teamwork with a deadpan expression. Clara quickly roasts Sven for his sheer arrogance, forcing him to apologize for the mess, before the bickering squad continues their march, completely oblivious to a strange creature watching them. Suddenly, a giant carnivorous plant drops from the canopy, catching the group completely off guard, and before anyone can react, the beast lunges forward and snaps directly at the startled teenagers, leaving our clumsy protagonist sitting on the dirt while apologizing profusely for his awkward stumble. Secretly, Blake quietly places his hand on the ground to cast a subtle tracking spell, before cheerfully claiming he stumbled upon a much safer path while falling down. Trusting his guidance, the group quickly follows him deeper into the dense, overgrown forest, though Clara can't help but feel slightly suspicious about their teammates' convenient luck. Soon, Blake points toward the trees, claiming he can hear the faint sound of running water, leading them to a perfect campsite, completely unaware of the glowing red eyes watching from the shadows. As night falls, our overpowered protagonist volunteers to take the first watch while the kids sleep. Out of nowhere, a massive red-eyed lion monster creeps out of the bushes, targeting the lone defender, and with a terrifying roar, the beast lunges forward to bite his head clean off. Instantly, a powerful blue barrier materializes, shocking the giant predator and sending it flying backward, forcing the defeated monster to whimper in absolute terror before scurrying away into the dark. Hearing the commotion, Sven groggily sits up and asks if anything happened, but Blake just smiles. This young trainee kindly offers to take over the night watch so the old man can rest, showing a rare moment of genuine respect as he thanks his surprisingly reliable roommate. Blake simply smiles back, glad to see his young teammate is finally warming up to him. Throughout the night, a faint protective dome shimmers around their camp, keeping all threats at bay, allowing Sven to marvel the next morning at how incredibly lucky and smooth their journey has been. Therese starts wondering if their incredibly smooth journey has something to do with the mysterious old man, but Clara quickly dismisses the thought, urging the group to hurry toward the target nest. Meanwhile, the arrogant noble laughs in his luxurious room, confident his brutal trap has already finished them, revealing that the destination he prepared for the rookies holds a much deadlier surprise. Suddenly, a massive level 4 salamander blocks their path, radiating an overwhelming aura of pure heat, which instantly sends Clara into a panic as she screams for everyone to run away, only to realize they are completely surrounded by multiple giant fire-breathing beasts. Dropping to his knees, Sven completely gives up on life as his courage instantly evaporates, wailing in absolute despair that there is absolutely no way for them to survive this encounter, while the girls hold on to each other, trembling in terror as the end draws near. With a terrifying roar, the lead monster charges up a massive ball of concentrated fire, unleashing a devastating torrent of flames that completely engulfs the helpless group of trainees. Looking up in confusion, Clara slowly opens her eyes, realizing she does not feel any heat, thanks to Blake calmly standing in front of them with a massive, glowing blue barrier. This girls stare in absolute shock, slowly realizing that the old man is actually protecting them, even as the furious beast continues to pour a relentless stream of fire against the shield. Still trembling on the ground, Sven panics that they are trapped and cannot escape this nightmare, prompting our overpowered protagonist to take a calm, steady step forward into the blazing heat, leaving his teammates to watch his back in silent, breathless awe as he prepares to fight. Before turning around with a reassuring smile, telling the kids to just wait safely inside. Sven immediately panics, screaming in absolute horror as he realizes the old man is actually walking out. Reaching his hand out in desperation, the terrified teenager begs his roommate to come back, convinced that a simple barrier mage is just throwing his life away as a useless decoy. Clara quickly tries to coordinate an escape plan, refusing to let their teammate's sacrifice be in vain. Though Sven still hesitates, completely torn between saving his own skin and abandoning the old man. Suddenly, Therese gasps in utter confusion as she notices something strange happening to the raging fire outside, prompting the entire squad to peer through the glowing blue shield to witness the impossible, leaving the young trainees completely speechless as they try to comprehend what they are seeing. Outside the dome, our overpowered protagonist locks his glowing blue eyes onto the massive predator, and with a single lightning-fast slash of blue energy, he cleanly decapitates the giant beast. He casually strolls forward as the massive monster collapses behind him in a spray of blood. This effortless display of pure dominance sends his teammates into another massive spiral of disbelief, but our quiet hero barely pays them any mind, already scanning the area for his next target. Right on cue, another furious salamander charges up a massive, glowing ball of fire in its throat, unleashing a devastating blast that Blake easily dodges by leaping high into the air, landing with absolute grace while kicking up a beautiful wave of glowing blue magical particles. Refusing to back down, the giant lizard prepares to launch another relentless barrage of flames, forcing our protagonist to weave through a chaotic rain of fireballs with effortless, high-speed movements. Deciding it is time to wrap things up, he brings his hands together to channel his mana, manifesting a massive crystalline blue gauntlet on his arm to deliver a devastating final blow. Channeling his massive mana, our overpowered protagonist prepares to unleash a devastating strike, slamming his crystal-reinforced fist directly onto the skull of the terrified level 4 beast, which triggers a massive shockwave of blue energy that completely shatters the surrounding ground, allowing him to land with absolute grace as the giant monster is instantly vaporized. Dusting off his shoulders, Blake casually remarks that the fight is finally over, silently wondering if this legendary beast was actually just a weirdly weak lizard. Behind him, the traumatized teenagers stare with their jaws practically dragging on the dirt, before immediately swarming their roommate with a barrage of loud, chaotic questions about his power, leaving our humble protagonist to sweat drop, thinking this was just basic survival in the demon realm. Meanwhile, Clara begins overanalyzing his moves, wondering if barrier magic is secretly the most broken class, concluding that this seemingly harmless old man is definitely hiding some massive world-class secrets. Back at the academy, the arrogant noble is busy celebrating their guaranteed demise, boasting about his flawless plan of luring the rookies directly into a deadly monster nest, completely convinced that there is absolutely no way for a simple barrier mage to survive. Right on cue, the instructor announces the arrival of the very first team to return, sending the smug noble into a state of pure, unadulterated shock as he turns around, clutching his head in absolute agony while screaming internally about how they are still breathing. He quickly tries to cope, assuming they must have cowardly fled without completing their mission. But his brief moment of hope is instantly shattered when the instructor suddenly gasps in disbelief, holding up a massive salamander fang while declaring their team just set an all-time academy record. This arrogant noble completely loses his mind, screaming in disbelief that a mere barrier mage defeated a level 4 monster, while the academy instructor happily awards Team F their points for completing the impossible mission. This sudden victory leaves the other trainees completely baffled, wondering how a deadly salamander nest even got there. But Sven is too busy celebrating their top rank, eagerly giving all the credit to their reliable roommate. Clara and Therese readily agree, knowing they never would have survived the forest without the old man's guidance, prompting our humble protagonist to quickly wave it off, claiming their success was purely a team effort. He insists that he only lent a tiny bit of help, trying his best to stay under the radar, which Sven happily accepts, officially declaring the old man a good guy as the girls smile warmly. Still, Clara remains highly skeptical, silently noting that having so many disadvantages is far too convenient to be a coincidence. At that exact moment, the furious noble watches them celebrate from afar, clenching his fist in absolute trembling rage. Glaring with pure hatred, the petty aristocrat swears to destroy the barrier mage once and for all. And a few days later, the academy gathers the trainees to announce a brand new competitive training format. Finding the main area too cramped, Team F decides to move over to the less crowded second training ground, completely unaware that the scheming noble is watching their every move with a dark, predatory gaze. A sinister grin spreads across his face, clearly plotting another devious trap to humiliate our overpowered hero. Meanwhile, Sven playfully challenges Blake to a friendly spar, asking the old man to go easy on him. Suddenly, the arrogant noble interrupts their session, smugly offering to personally instruct the rookies instead. Sven and Clara quickly whisper among themselves, realizing Vice Captain Gunther is stepping in due to a shortage of instructors, though the petty noble immediately snaps at them to stop whispering and gather around for their lesson. However, he coldly points at Blake, telling our protagonist to just stand there like an idiot and watch. Gunther smugly announces the start of their training session, targeting the three young rookies, and without warning, he blasts Therese backward with a sudden, brutal strike. Clara immediately rushes over to cast a quick healing spell on her injured teammate, while the sadistic noble mocks them, claiming they would already be dead in a real fight. Sven watches in absolute fury as the corrupt instructor demands the girls get back up, warning Blake to stay back and watch because the weaklings need the extra practice. Our overpowered protagonist glares silently, barely holding back his immense, world-shaking magical power, which only makes the arrogant noble laugh, mocking his uselessness as a simple barrier mage. Turning his attention back to Sven, the petty instructor barks at him to get into position, instantly channeling a massive, highly unstable ball of concentrated fire magic in his hands. With a maniacal grin, the corrupt noble prepares to launch his devastating attack, unleashing a massive torrent of flames that completely engulfs the terrified teenager. Refusing to stop, the sadistic instructor fires another relentless barrage of explosive heat, leaving the entire training ground covered in a massive blazing inferno of pure destruction. He smugly turns to Blake, claiming his hand simply slipped because he felt insulted, laughing off the brutal assault as a passionate lesson that only singed them a little. This arrogant noble proudly gestures toward the clearing smoke, expecting to see their charred bodies, only to witness Sven standing completely unharmed behind a shimmering hexagonal blue barrier. This impossible sight sends the noble into a state of pure bug-eyed shock, while Sven looks at his hands, slowly realizing his quiet roommate just saved his life. Sweating profusely, the corrupt vice captain wonders if the useless old man somehow interfered with his attack. Meanwhile, a crowd of curious trainees gathers around, whispering about how badly Team F is getting beaten. But the smug noble quickly plays it off as a simple, friendly guidance session, sending Sven and Therese into an absolute fit of rage over his blatant bullying. Watching silently from the sidelines, our overpowered protagonist keeps his glowing blue eyes locked on the kids, while Clara firmly declares that she wants to win this fight, using everyone's combined strength, prompting the three rookies to stand tall together with newfound determination in their eyes. Seeing their growth, Blake lets out a soft, approving smile as he prepares to support them. Sven boldly challenges the corrupt instructor to continue their so-called training session. The surrounding crowd immediately starts cheering for the rookies, severely bruising the arrogant noble's fragile ego, leaving him with absolutely no choice but to keep fighting to save his own reputation. With a quick wave of her hands, Clara casts a glowing green buff to rejuvenate her teammates, though the delusional vice captain just laughs, confidently preparing another massive wave of fire magic. He unleashes a devastating explosion of flames that completely consumes the entire training ground, only for Sven and Therese to charge straight through the inferno completely untouched by the heat, sending the noble into a screaming panic as he realizes another invisible barrier protected them. Seizing the perfect opening, the two rookies immediately charge up their own offensive spells, unleashing a combined magical strike that blasts the corrupt instructor backward in a painful explosion. This leaves Sven absolutely ecstatic as he realizes they actually managed to land a solid hit, while Gunther glares back with bloodshot eyes, his face contorted in pure murderous humiliation. Before the humiliated noble can retaliate, the rookies are suddenly startled by a loud interruption, as a heavy staff slams onto the stone floor to halt the unauthorized duel, revealing a high-ranking academy official who steps directly between the rookies and their corrupt instructor. Our quiet protagonist watches the sudden intervention calmly, knowing his secret still perfectly safe, while the furious official barks at Gunther, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. This cornered noble desperately tries to claim this brutal beatdown was just a friendly guidance session, but the official immediately shuts him down, exposing his petty grudge against the harmless barrier mage. With absolute authority, he relieves the corrupt vice captain of his duties and promises a swift demotion. This sudden downfall sends the arrogant noble into a silent, trembling spiral of pure, murderous hatred, directing all his blame toward Blake as the scene shifts to Team F relaxing in their lounge. Sven happily celebrates the bully's demotion, calling him a total scumbag for targeting their roommate, though our humble hero quickly apologizes, feeling guilty for dragging the kids into his personal mess. His energetic roommate frantically waves his hands, insisting that the old man did absolutely nothing wrong. Suddenly, the three rookies lean in incredibly close, eagerly demanding to know how he got so strong, leaving our sweating protagonist completely cornered as he struggles to invent a believable excuse. But he is saved by a messenger announcing an urgent escort request from the Witch of Wisdom. This unexpected summons leaves Blake pointing at himself in utter confusion, wondering how she found him, and before he can even protest, the polite messenger quickly drags him out of the room. Behind him, the girls realize Edda belongs to the legendary hero's party, questioning who their roommate really is. Meanwhile, our overpowered hero is brought directly to the Grand Hendria Kingdom Magic Research Institute. Meeting our protagonist at the institute, the legendary Witch of Wisdom warmly welcomes him back, revealing that this 13-year-old girl is actually the brilliant director of magic research, prompting Blake to casually pat her head like she is just a normal kid. This casual gesture completely horrifies her assistant, who screams about respecting the genius Mage, leaving our humble protagonist to quickly apologize for his overly familiar and casual behavior. But the young director quietly dismisses the fuss, wanting to get straight to business. She explains that she summoned him to borrow his incredible power for capturing live monsters, noting that standard cages fail because the beasts constantly rampage and emit toxic miasma. Studying these creatures directly in the lab could help them develop vital countermeasures against miasma, which normally restricts safe entry into the deadly demon realm to the hero's party. Getting back to the point, Edda asks if his barriers can contain level 5 beasts, and while the assistants scoff at the impossible request, Blake calmly accepts the challenge. Looking completely unfazed, our overpowered protagonist confidently reiterates that he can get it done, sending the high-strung assistant into a state of absolute, jaw-dropping disbelief at his sheer audacity. He casually explains that capturing high-level monsters should not be an issue for him. Hearing his confident answer, the young witch lets out a subtle, highly satisfied smile, while Blake reasons that a level 5 beast should be easy after his salamander fight. This logical conclusion only infuriates the assistant further as she accuses him of telling lies, but Edda quickly intervenes, assuring her frantic staff that everything will be perfectly fine. With her glowing blue eyes flashing with absolute authority, she demands silence regarding his cooperation. This high-strung assistant bows deeply, offering a sincere apology for her earlier outburst. Meanwhile, the male researcher promises to make sure this mission officially counts as academy training, but the suspicious female assistant silently wonders if Blake has some dark leverage over Eda, swearing to protect her beloved director from whatever sinister plot this old man is cooking up. This intense, murderous aura immediately sends a terrifying shiver down her colleague's spine, while Eda cheerfully announces that their destination is the dangerous, abandoned Bourbon mine, instantly rallying the entire research team to gear up and prepare for departure. Soon, the group rides out of the city on a pack of dinosaur-like raptor mounts, allowing Eda to happily catch up with her savior and ask if he met Alice, laughing warmly when Blake confirms that the fierce warrior is doing perfectly fine. Behind them, the jealous assistant fumes in silence, unable to comprehend this cozy relationship, especially since she knows they would have died back in the Forest of Death, prompting Blake to recall the fateful day he was hunting near the demon realm, stumbling upon a heavily injured Alice who was desperately trying to survive the monster onslaught, begging him with her final breaths to save her comrades trapped nearby. Our overpowered protagonist immediately rushed into the dark woods to search the area, eventually finding a young Eda completely surrounded by a swarm of bat monsters, who would have easily finished her off if he had not intervened. Though our humble hero just chuckles, claiming he did nothing out of the ordinary, as excited children run alongside their mounts as they head toward their dangerous destination. Blake mentions he has been maintaining barriers alone since he was 9, making him envy normal childhoods. But the proud young witch quickly scoffs, claiming a genius like her never needed to play with kids anyway, though she still sneaks a quiet, curious glance back at him to gauge his reaction. Watching the local children run past their mounts, Eda falls silent as she contemplates his lonely past. A few days later, the research expedition finally arrives at the ominous purple-shrouded abandoned Bourbon mine. Seeing the toxic fog, the young director asks Blake if he can construct a mobile defensive barrier, prompting his immediate casual agreement while the high-strung assistant screams that such a feat is completely impossible. Without a single care, our overpowered protagonist clasps his hands and summons a brilliant blue magical aura, stepping directly into the deadly high-density purple miasma without a single moment of hesitation, leaving the panicked assistant to declare his actions suicidal as she assumes he just died trying to show off. Suddenly, Blake pokes his head back out of the fog completely unharmed, wondering why they are not following him, while Eda smugly smiles, instructing her stunned team to leave their mounts behind and enter the mine. This ridiculous display of casual power leaves the suspicious female assistant trembling in absolute, speechless disbelief. Walking inside, the researchers marvel at the moving barrier, admitting they have never heard of such advanced magic, though the stubborn assistant quickly huffs, desperately claiming that blocking basic miasma is nothing special. As the group heads deeper down the tracks, Eda notes the lack of monsters but warns of a pool ahead, explaining to a curious Blake that the corruption could stem from beast, a curse, or natural phenomena. She details how cursed objects created by humans or ominous natural entities naturally generate this toxic energy, which eventually births powerful monsters that only intensify the surrounding corruption to create an endless, deadly cycle. Including that the legendary Demon King himself was the ultimate, most terrifying manifestation of this corruptive force. Eda explains that defeating the source of miasma instantly vaporizes all the monsters born from it, though Blake listens closely as she admits that plenty of dangerous beasts still remain. She emphasizes how crucial this research mission is for developing countermeasures against the toxic corruption, but her grand academic lecture is suddenly cut short when she trips over a random rock. Luckily, our quick-thinking protagonist catches the clumsy young witch before she faceplants onto the stone floor. Blake kindly asks if she is all right, causing the flustered genius to blush and stammer an apology, as he casually offers her a piggyback ride since the path ahead is so dark, which immediately triggers the overprotective female assistant, who screams at him to show some respect. Trying to hide her embarrassment, Eda quickly insists she is perfectly fine and commands everyone to move, leading the group deeper into the cavern where the purple fog grows dangerously thick. Suddenly, a massive, heavy hoof stomps into the mud, echoing loudly through the dark tunnels, revealing a terrifying, red-eyed minotaur that lets out a deafening roar right in front of them, and the researchers instantly lose their minds in panic over this level 5 monster. While our overpowered hero calmly suggests capturing it, the arrogant assistant barks at him to stay back, only for their offensive spells to do absolutely nothing as the giant beast easily shatters their attacks, unleashing a massive shockwave of pure rage that sends the entire research team stumbling backward. Trembling in fear, the stubborn assistant finally realizes they are completely outmatched by this brute. Even Eda internally panics, realizing they desperately need Blake's overpowered barrier magic to survive this. So the terrified assistant turns to her director, begging her to capture the beast, leaving the young witch staring back with a completely blank, sweating face of pure, unadulterated regret. This panicked researchers immediately dump all their hopes onto Eda, begging her to handle the beast. sweating bullets under her giant hat, the young director reluctantly steps forward to keep up appearances, while the massive level 5 Minotaur looms over her like an absolute mountain of muscle. Watching from the sidelines, Blake calmly analyzes the situation, knowing she is completely out of her depth, as the young witch desperately grips her staff, trying to summon enough magic to survive. But the giant beast does not wait, lunging forward with a terrifying, earth-shattering roar. Standing her ground, Edda prepares for the worst as the monster closes the distance, prompting our overpowered protagonist to finally narrow his eyes and take matters into his own hands. Just as the Minotaur swings its massive axe down to crush the young director, a brilliant blue barrier suddenly materializes out of nowhere, completely halting the devastating blow, leaving the watching researchers to gasp in absolute shock at this impossible defensive feat. Within seconds, the giant Minotaur is entirely encased in a massive glowing hexagonal cage, courtesy of Blake, who casually maintains the spell with a single effortless gesture. Yet, the clueless assistant still tries to push him away, screaming at him not to interfere. But Edda immediately barks at her to shut up and stop being so incredibly foolish, explaining to her stunned team that Blake was brought along specifically to capture the monster. She instructs her assistants to actually look at what is happening inside the barrier, revealing that the refined magic is actively purifying the miasma and putting the beast to sleep. This mind-blowing revelation leaves the stubborn assistant trembling, realizing she completely misunderstood his power, while Edda stands in absolute awe, silently admitting that her own legendary magic could never achieve this. Edda can only stare down in silent embarrassment, completely humbled by Blake's ridiculous display of power, quickly turning to her team to announce they successfully captured the beast and should head back immediately. While the male researcher warmly thanks our hero, he politely asks him to keep carrying the giant monster, prompting the young witch to march ahead while her colleague watches her with a deeply concerned expression. He silently wonders if Edda is secretly harboring some heavy emotional burden behind her proud facade. Back at the Research Institute, the young director proudly declares that their dangerous mission was a total success. This massive level 5 Minotaur stands perfectly contained right in the middle of their main laboratory, leaving Edda to marvel at how incredibly convenient Blake's portable barrier magic actually is. When she asks how long he can keep it up, our overpowered protagonist casually replies he can do it semi-permanently, which prompts the male researcher to ask if there is any way to keep it active without constant manual feeding. Nervously, the female assistant suggests they should just use Edda's legendary magic to secure the beast instead, but Blake casually pulls out a piece of paper, claiming he has the perfect solution for their problem. Placing the paper down, he explains it is a custom magic circle he designed to maintain barriers automatically. Recognizing the design from the Demon Realm border, Edda admits she always wondered what genius created such a masterpiece. Our humble hero just laughs sheepishly, prompting the young witch to ask in absolute shock if he made it. Blake casually confirms her suspicion, mentioning he drew up the design when he was only 9 years old. Recalling the dark days 30 years ago when the deadly miasma was rapidly eroding the entire continent. Since the barrier mages could not leave their posts, he developed this rechargeable circle to give them a break, planning for 100 mages to power it, though he ultimately ended up maintaining the entire border alone, laughing off the fact that holding up the continent's defense single-handedly was actually a little bit tiring. Seeing the researchers completely lose their minds, Blake casually asks if something is wrong, prompting Edda to scream at him for being so ridiculously humble about his world-saving achievements. But our boy just shrugs it off, placing the custom magic circle on the floor. He immediately channels his mana to activate the device and secure the captured beast, instantly trapping the massive Minotaur inside a flawless, self-sustaining blue energy cage. Blake cheerfully notes the barrier will hold for a few hours without any manual feeding, offering to stay close by to ensure nothing goes wrong during their analysis, which Edda gratefully accepts before rallying her energized team to begin their intense research. This laboratory quickly buzzes with activity as the scientists study the safely contained monster, while our overpowered protagonist quietly watches over them from his seat in the corner. Hours fly by as the young director tirelessly mixes potions and reviews ancient texts, until the exhausted assistants finally pack up their things and head home for the night. Noticing that only Edda remains, Blake watches her continue to work in the quiet lab, as the flustered witch offers him a private room so he can rest up, explaining that she must keep working to protect the citizens from the miasma. With a warm smile, our humble hero casually decides to pull an all-nighter too, causing the proud genius to blush and claim she does not need his pity, though Blake jokingly excuses his presence by claiming he just wants to monitor his barrier. Giving in to his stubborn kindness, she quietly tells him to do as he pleases, and our protagonist happily agrees, ready to protect her through the long night. A week passes by with the giant level 5 Minotaur still perfectly secured inside Blake's automatic barrier. And soon enough, the male researcher decides to pack up and head out for the evening, leaving Edda buried behind massive stacks of research books as she dismissively waves him away. Stepping into the quiet hallway, Blake decides to confront the stubborn female assistant to get some answers, asking her why the rest of the team always leaves the young director to work completely alone, which immediately irritates the high-strung assistant, who tells him to stop meddling in their business. But our protagonist pushes further, wondering why they do not even try to help their exhausted leader. Defensively, she explains that ordinary people like them simply cannot keep up with a legendary genius. Recalling how Eda has always operated on an entirely different level since she was a child, she admits that staying late would only get in the young witch's way during her intense research, advising Blake that he should probably just head home too if he has nothing left to do. And walking away down the dimly lit corridor, she leaves our hero standing alone with his thoughts. Blake lets out a heavy sigh, realizing just how much pressure the young director is carrying. Quietly peeking back inside the laboratory, he decides to check on the hardworking genius one last time, only to find Eda completely passed out face first on her desk amidst a mountain of paperwork. Seeing her sleeping so peacefully after working herself to the bone, our kind-hearted protagonist smiles softly, gently draping his own warm cloak over her shoulders before leaving her to rest in peace. A few days later, the lunch bell rings and the busy research institute finally takes a break, but while the other scientists happily run off to the cafeteria, Eda stays behind with dry bread, prompting Blake to walk over and gently tease her about her terrible work-life balance. Eda insists she is perfectly fine, telling her concerned colleague to go ahead and take a break. Meanwhile, the rest of the research team gathers in the lively cafeteria for a warm meal, loudly gossiping about how incredibly dedicated their young director is for working through lunch, claiming they would only get in her way since her genius level is completely incomprehensible, with the high-strung female assistant boasting that Eda is the ultimate treasure of the kingdom. Suddenly, the male researcher speaks up from the doorway, completely disagreeing with their lazy attitude, which immediately outrages the other scientists, who slam their hands down and demand an explanation, prompting him to calmly point out that dumping all their responsibilities on a child is pathetic. But the stubborn assistant instantly snaps back, screaming that Eda is a once-in-a-generation magical prodigy, while the rest of the clueless crowd joins in, claiming she is mature beyond her years. Unfazed, the male colleague argues that her immense talent does not automatically make her an adult, remembering how she used to look so incredibly small and isolated during their travels together, silently watching other normal kids play with a deep sense of envy in her eyes, even forcing herself to stand tall against terrifying monsters just to meet everyone's high expectations. He explains that because the young witch is so remarkably smart and kind-hearted, she constantly forces herself to act like the perfect, flawless leader they all want, asking the stunned group if they can truly call her a grown-up with a straight face. Stepping closer, he demands to know if anyone has ever bothered to ask about her feelings, delivering a final heavy question about whether they actually care about helping their exhausted director. This brutal reality check leaves the stubborn assistant completely speechless, trembling in deep, silent guilt. Shaken by the harsh lecture, the researchers awkwardly pack up and head back to work, only to freeze when they spot the young director standing quietly in the corridor. And instead of offering comfort, they simply walk past her with heavy, guilty silence, prompting her concerned male colleague to try and speak with her before she quickly turns away, leaving him to watch her lonely form retreat down the dimly lit hallway. Later that night, the worried researcher sits alone in his room, unable to shake his anxiety, until a soft knock on the door suddenly interrupts his deep, troubled thoughts, revealing the young witch standing outside in her nightgown, quietly asking for a brief chat. So he immediately welcomes her inside and prepares a warm drink to soothe her distress, gently handing her the steaming mug while apologizing for any trouble he might have caused. Before she can even take a sip, he drapes his own warm cloak over her shoulders, offering a kind smile as he reminds her that the night air is quite chilly. Clutching the warm fabric, the young director blushes slightly and softly whispers her gratitude, feeling a rare sense of comfort and safety that she has not experienced in years. While a peaceful silence settles over the two colleagues sitting together in the quiet room, which Eda finally breaks by apologizing for dragging him into her complicated daily struggles, sadly explaining that she was once filled with immense enthusiasm for her research. But as her team began praising her genius, they slowly stopped putting in any real effort, leaving her with the painful realization that people always change their behavior around her. As she begins to recount her childhood, explaining she was born to completely ordinary village parents. She explains that her lineage was completely average, with absolutely no nobles or magicians in her family. Yet she somehow managed to learn how to speak almost immediately after her birth, quickly teaching herself how to read by devouring an old magic book her parents owned. This early fascination led to her casting spells before she could even walk, leaving her ecstatic parents to proudly declare that their little girl was a certified genius, which prompted them to immediately enroll her in every advanced magical class they could find. Soon, the entire village began treating the young prodigy like a local celebrity, forcing her to act like a mature adult while other kids her age played outside. And because she was a magician, everyone expected her to master both research and combat. At just 6 years old, she was thrown into terrifying training sessions out of sheer desperation, constantly telling herself she was a genius just to survive the crushing weight of their expectations. Returning to the present, the young witch looks down in shame as her voice begins to tremble, clutching her nightgown tightly as she struggles to confess her deepest, most hidden secret. But her colleague cuts right to the chase, gently asking if she is actually terrified of monsters. Eda looks up in absolute shock, completely stunned that he managed to see right through her facade, prompting the researcher to explain that he noticed her subtle panic during their recent battles, recalling how she froze up when the massive level 5 Minotaur first appeared before them, and how she stood trembling with her staff raised, completely paralyzed by her overwhelming fear. Letting out a sad, defeated sigh, the young director admits he is incredibly observant, confessing she only survived the hero's party by hiding safely behind the frontliners as support magic. Trembling on the bed, Eda tearfully confesses that she is absolutely terrified of fighting monsters alone, but Blake surprises her by admitting that he is also scared of facing those terrifying beasts, explaining that he simply had to fight every single day just to survive the harsh world. Looking down in defeat, the young witch quietly wishes she possessed that same mental strength, prompting our kind protagonist to reassure her that she is already perfect just the way she is. Yet Eda protests, crying out that everyone constantly expects her to be an incredibly powerful genius. Clutching her head in panic, she confesses her deepest fear of being completely abandoned if she fails, haunted by memories of cold crowds demanding she prove her worth as a magical prodigy, recalling how people would instantly turn their backs on her the moment she showed any weakness. She covers her ears, begging imaginary voices not to leave her as she promises to act mature. Suddenly, a gentle hand rests on her head, interrupting the dark spiral of her painful memories. As Blake looks down at her with a soft, comforting expression to soothe her trembling heart, promising the tearful young director that he will absolutely never abandon her no matter what happens. He acknowledges how incredibly difficult things have been for her, speaking with absolute sincerity, gently stroking her blue hair while validating the immense suffering she has quietly endured for years. With tears finally spilling over, Eda listens as he softly asks if it was tough for her, offering her the ultimate comfort by telling her that she has done an amazing job. Hearing those long-awaited words, the young witch completely breaks down and lets out a loud sob, throwing her arms around our hero's neck as she clings to him for dear life. Finally letting go of her perfect facade to cry about wanting to play and just be normal, Eda tearfully admits she hates fighting monsters, sobbing about how terrifying and painful the battles truly are. Blake gently points out that normal kids are allowed to show weakness to adults, reassuring her that she does not need to carry the burden of being a perfect prodigy alone, which makes the young witch look up in disbelief, quietly asking if she can truly rely on him. He pulls her into a warm embrace, instantly melting away years of isolation and fear. Resting her head on his lap, Eda softly whispers her gratitude as she finally lets her guard down, holding his hand tightly as if afraid this newfound warmth might suddenly vanish, while our protagonist gently strokes her blue hair, letting her rest peacefully after so much suffering. Looking down at her with a soft smile, he promises to protect her fragile heart, watching over her in the quiet room just like he did during their past adventures together. He remembers how they used to fight side by side against relentless waves of vicious monsters, recalling the exact moment she collapsed from sheer exhaustion during a chaotic battle, leaving him to watch over her recovery in a quiet, dimly lit cabin. Back then, he had quietly prepared to slip away into the cold night, only to stop when he noticed her reaching out blindly in her sleep, whimpering in deep distress as terrifying nightmares of abandonment haunted her fragile mind. Unable to leave her side, he had stayed to hold her hand until she finally calmed down, and returning to the present, he holds her just as gently in the quiet room, smiling softly as she sleepily begs him never to leave her all alone, whispering to the sleeping genius that he will always be right there by her side. A few days later, our boy Blake finds himself waiting in the middle of a bustling market street when the soft, rhythmic tapping of little shoes suddenly approaches him from behind, prompting him to turn around as a familiar voice quietly asks if she kept him waiting. Standing there is Eda, looking like a normal kid in a cute white dress and straw hat, and with a warm smile, he reassures her before offering to start their long-awaited day out. This lively festival atmosphere surrounds them as they step into the heart of the crowded city, leaving the young witch completely wide-eyed and amazed by the sheer number of people around them. She admits she has never actually played in the capital or visited the market street before, which only makes Blake chuckle and say that her lack of experience is actually a great thing. Grabbing her hand, he pulls her along, explaining that first-time adventures are always the most exciting, instantly bringing a massive, genuine smile to her face as she happily agrees with him. Their first stop is a colorful sweet stall, where she carefully ponders which treat to choose, and soon they are strolling hand in hand, happily munching on giant lollipops together in the sun. Suddenly, a group of local children runs past them, laughing and playing a game of tag, prompting Eda to instantly forget her worries and chase after them with pure childlike joy. Watching her run around, Blake feels a deep sense of relief seeing her act like a kid, as the beautiful sunset paints the sky while they wave goodbye to their new friends. Walking back together, the young director holds his hand tightly, her heart finally feeling completely at peace, showing off a radiant, carefree smile that she has kept hidden away for so many years. Together, the two companions slowly disappear into the evening crowd, ready to face whatever comes next. Walking through the bustling market, Eda suddenly stops when a glittering jewelry display catches her eye, as the friendly merchant behind the counter greets them with a warm, welcoming smile. Blake notices her staring and gently asks if she found something she likes, surprising her, which immediately makes the young witch blush, nervously clutching her dress in embarrassment. Chuckling at her cute reaction, our protagonist decides to take matters into his own hands, picking out a beautiful blue gem necklace while Eda frantically insists on paying for it herself. He simply smiles and reassures her, explaining that he really wants to give her a present before handing over the coins to the merchant while the young girl watches in absolute awe. This lady happily hands over the sparkling accessory, wishing the little miss a wonderful day, prompting Blake to gently place the necklace around her neck as she beams with gratitude. Clutching the precious gift close to her chest, Eda practically radiates pure, unadulterated happiness. But the wholesome moment takes a hilarious turn when the merchant praises the kind father and daughter. Both of them instantly freeze in sheer shock, completely stunned by the massive age misunderstanding. Yet they quickly laugh it off, letting the funny mistake slide as they enjoy their day. Hand in hand, the two companions stroll through the festive streets under a beautiful, warm sunset. 1 week later, they stand together in the laboratory to address the entire research team. Eda steps forward and sincerely apologizes, admitting she couldn't find a direct cure for the miasma. Explaining that barrier magic is the key, she reveals plans to recruit more barrier mages. She turns to Blake to ask for his continued cooperation, which he happily promises to give. Suddenly, one of the researchers steps forward, nervously calling out to interrupt their conversation. This entire research team bows deeply, sincerely apologizing for dumping all their burdens onto Eda, admitting they let their jealousy and inferiority complexes make them completely complacent and lazy, while confessing they only look down on barrier mages to protect their own fragile pride. Shouting out in unison, the group begs for forgiveness as they lower their heads once more, prompting Blake to quickly reassure them that he holds absolutely no grudges against them, though Eda gently warns them to start pulling their own weight from now on. Turning to our protagonist, the researchers eagerly praise the sheer greatness of his barrier magic, which makes the young witch ask what suddenly gave them the courage to apologize. Her colleague explains they always noticed her suffering, but were too afraid to face their helplessness, until Blake scolded them and showed them what it truly means to support one another. She smiles warmly, declaring that both our hero and his unique magic are absolutely wonderful. Hearing this, Eda looks on with a soft smile, agreeing from the bottom of her heart. Sometime later, the entire laboratory gathers outside the massive dome to bid Blake a fond farewell, as he promises to keep them updated on any new progress regarding the miasma research. Before he can leave, the young director frantically gestures for him to lean down closer, whispering a sweet request to go out and play together like normal kids again sometime. With a gentle, heartwarming smile, our kind protagonist happily promises to indulge her anytime she wants, leaving the young witch absolutely beaming with joy while her confused colleagues look on. Waving goodbye to the cheering crowd, Blake finally sets off on his journey back home, wondering how his friends are doing after being away from them for so long. Returning home at last, Blake is instantly bombarded by his worried friends screaming about his lateness, prompting our hero to raise his hands defensively while trying to explain his wild absence. Once he reveals his crazy exploits, the trio sits in absolute shock over his monster-capturing adventures, with the hot-headed swordsman internally marveling at Blake's exclusive access to the prestigious research institute, while the dark-haired girl can barely believe he is casually rubbing shoulders with the hero's party. Even their quiet companion begins to wonder if barrier magic is actually some kind of cheat code, leaving them all staring at our clueless protagonist as they question his true identity. Trying to change the subject, Blake asks how their training has been going during his absence, which immediately gets the fiery swordsman hyped up to show off his hard work tomorrow. This next morning at the training grounds, the trio unleashes their elemental spells in unison, combining their powers into a massive burst of energy that tears through the target area. Watching from the sidelines, Blake carefully analyzes their progress as the explosive smoke clears. Despite their flashy display, the exhausted group collapses while lamenting how incredibly slow their growth feels, only for a group of arrogant classmates to walk by and mock their dropout status, instantly sending the hot-tempered swordsman into a silent, teeth-gritting rage at their insults. Feeling completely defeated, the dark-haired girl sadly accepts their low ranking as an unchangeable reality. This defeatist attitude completely triggers her fiery friend, who angrily accuses her of just giving up, forcing her to defensively snap back as the tension between them rapidly boils over. But the frustrated swordsman simply storms off, declaring that he refuses to throw in the towel. Suddenly, a mysterious pair of boots steps into view, halting the remaining group in their tracks. This mysterious boots belong to none other than Blake, who finds the girls whispering in the hallway. Looking completely exhausted by the constant drama, our hero can only sigh at their gloomy faces. He nervously steps forward to ask what on earth is causing all this sudden tension, only to find the hot-headed swordsman flat on his face in a dramatic, desperate bow. Sven desperately begs Blake to teach him magic, crying about how he might get kicked out, prompting our confused protagonist to kneel down and ask why he is going to such extremes. This fiery swordsman reveals he is actually the eldest son of a poor, rural noble family, explaining that he needs to earn serious money to make life easier for his struggling siblings. Blake listens quietly before pointing out that he really only knows how to use barrier magic, which instantly deflates the young warrior's hopes until our hero offers a surprising alternative, promising to teach him advanced combat techniques instead, which immediately gets the kid hyped up again. They agree to start their training first thing tomorrow, leaving Sven bowing in absolute gratitude. Arriving the next morning, the eager swordsman is completely shocked to find his female classmates waiting there too. As the dark-haired girl smugly declares they have no intention of letting him get ahead alone, our protagonist sheepishly rubs his neck, admitting he actually invited them along to join the session. This completely ruins Sven's dramatic solo training plans, making him pout while Blake apologizes for the surprise. Meanwhile, Therese quietly resolves to closely observe Blake to finally uncover the secret of his power. But when she taps his shoulder, he turns around with such a bright, dazzling smile that it completely catches the quiet girl off guard, instantly melting her serious, analytical focus, leaving her blushing furiously as she turns away, while Blake can only laugh at her cute reaction. Therese keeps her eyes glued to Blake, determined to analyze his secret techniques without getting caught. Meanwhile, the group heads deep into the dangerous mecha forest, where massive fire-breathing lizards await them. Sven immediately charges forward, unleashing a massive burst of fire magic directly at their scaly target. Feeling incredibly proud of his flashy move, the young warrior smugly boasts about his growing power. But his celebration is cut short when another massive beast lunges at him from the canopy. Fortunately, a brilliant flash of blue energy slices through the air, instantly neutralizing the threat. Blake steps in to pull the reckless swordsman back, warning him to never drop his guard, and things quickly get worse as a whole pack of monsters suddenly surrounds the group. Stepping in front of his panicked classmates, our protagonist prepares to handle the situation himself, offering to show them a real demonstration of how to handle a crowd of enemies. He channels a massive amount of magical energy, forming a glowing blue blade in his hand, and with one swift, blinding swing, he unleashes a devastating shockwave that clears the entire area, leaving the remaining monsters completely obliterated as he calmly finishes his brief lesson. This three students stand frozen in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend his ridiculous level of power, while Therese nervously gulps, realizing that their classmate is operating on a completely different level. Sven immediately demands to know how a simple barrier mage could possibly possess such overwhelming strength, prompting Blake to look back at them with a slightly nostalgic and serious expression, explaining that his past is a rather long story that requires a bit of explanation. Gathering around a quiet clearing, the group sits down to finally listen to his mysterious history, as Blake begins to recount his early days when he first discovered his unique barrier magic. As a young child, Blake was forcefully taken away to the harsh and unforgiving demon realm, where jagged cliffs and dark energies loomed over anyone unfortunate enough to end up there, forcing a group of young mages to constantly maintain barriers against the deadly miasma, though they were only given pathetic scraps of food before being completely abandoned by their captors. Left entirely on his own, our protagonist could only watch the carriage disappear into the distance. Since the barrier required constant focus, he was trapped in that exact spot without any escape, pushing his young body to the absolute limit while surviving on barely any sleep, until his meager rations ran completely dry, leaving him starving and on the verge of collapse. In his desperation, he came up with a wild plan to design an automatic magic circle, which instantly shocks his classmates, who point out that developing such advanced magic is practically impossible. However, Blake casually shrugs it off, confirming that he actually succeeded through sheer trial and error. Within just a few days, he managed to manifest a massive, self-sustaining circle of pure energy, though the immense strain of the process left him completely drained and gasping for breath, allowing the exhausted boy to finally collapse and sleep like a log. He even paid a passing merchant to share this revolutionary method with other struggling barrier mages, but his immediate survival was still threatened by a severe lack of food and shelter, especially after his first attempt at foraging in the woods ended with a massive monster chasing him out, forcing him to rely on the rare, meager rations delivered by passing knights every few months. Unfortunately, even those sparse deliveries eventually stopped, leaving the young boy completely isolated in the wilderness. Backed into a corner with no other choice, he bravely stepped back into the dangerous forest. Stepping into the pitch-black woods, our young hero immediately senses deadly eyes watching him from the shadows. Before he can even react, a massive horned beast charges out to turn him into lunch, forcing the terrified kid to desperately deploy his magic while running for his absolute life, which barely manages to block a devastating axe swing from the relentless monster. He collapses in exhaustion under his protective dome, barely surviving his first real taste of danger. Unfortunately, his dangerous foraging trip only yields a pathetic handful of wild mushrooms and weeds, while the dense miasma constantly forces him to waste precious mana on purification barriers, making him realize that his current defensive spells are completely useless for actual survival, so he dedicates every waking moment to researching new ways to upgrade his magic. Through relentless training, he finally learns how to manifest solid, physical barriers to block attacks, allowing him to easily trap monsters in glowing cubes while casually gathering his food. Fast forward 3 years later, a 12-year-old Blake is looking much healthier and more confident, though the dangerous forest still sends giant snake monsters to ambush him from behind. But our boy simply smiles, instantly trapping the massive serpent's head in a solid cube, leaving the beast completely helpless as he casually strolls away with his loot. With his refined skills, he easily fills his entire sack with fresh fruits and vegetables, yet he still lacks any real offensive power to actually defeat these dangerous creatures, prompting him to experiment with moving his stationary barriers to use them as weapons. His hard work eventually pays off, letting him spin high-speed energy cubes around his targets, and by age 15, he has officially mastered the art of freely controlling his barriers. He named this new style his offensive barrier technique, using sharp energy cubes to shred his targets. After years of starvation, his first taste of real monster meat was absolutely heavenly, though he first had to use his purification magic to completely cleanse it of deadly miasma. Determined to improve, the young mage pushed his research to the absolute limit, experimenting with the shape, hardness, and physical properties of his glowing blue platforms, until he could freely manipulate their viscosity and even wear them as solid armor. Back in the present, Blake explains how daily survival forced him to weaponize these defensive spells. Recalling the endless battles against giant fire-breathing lizards that hunted him day and night, he demonstrates by effortlessly blocking a massive stream of flames with a single hand, leaving his three young companions staring in absolute jaw-dropping disbelief at his casual display. With a sudden burst of speed, our hero leaps high into the air, channeling a highly concentrated sphere of pure barrier energy directly into his palm, before slicing clean through another massive beast with a single blinding flash of light. He casually turns back to his students, holding his glowing energy blade like it is nothing, prompting the dark-haired girl to nervously point out that he is way too overpowered. Our clueless protagonist can only sweat drop, genuinely surprised that they find his basic moves so impressive. Sven and the girls exchange solemn looks, suddenly understanding the tragic childhood that forged his monstrous strength, while Blake just stands there with a massive question mark floating over his head. He cheerfully reassures them that they can easily reach his level with just a little hard work, leaving the exhausted girls silently judging their insanely overpowered and completely oblivious mentor. Sven pumps his fist, psyching himself up to train hard and reach his mentor's ridiculous level, but Blake just smiles warmly, announcing that the timing for their next lesson is absolutely perfect, casually pointing toward a pair of massive fire-snorting lizards that just spawned right behind him. This sudden difficulty spike leaves the three students completely frozen in absolute jaw-dropping terror. Their desperate screams echo through the dense forest canopy as the brutal training session officially begins. Meanwhile, back at the royal palace, a highly respected red-haired captain walks through the grand hallways, showered in endless praise by passing noble bureaucrats who worship his legendary flawless track record, introducing none other than Lancelot, the kingdom's most celebrated young prodigy and rising star. He politely downplays his grand title, though his humble attitude only makes his admirers cheer louder. Strolling past the sycophants as he continues his walk through the luxurious imperial corridors, joining his younger squad mates, the captain secretly agrees that the praise is actually quite accurate. Yet he still plays modest while his loyal subordinates insist that everyone completely relies on him. Deep down, the red-haired warrior feels he is just slightly more talented than the average mage, lamenting how his magical growth has recently stagnated without any real goals left to achieve, especially since his overwhelming fire spells can easily incinerate any threat in a single, flashy blast. Ever since the Demon King was defeated, the world has simply run out of powerful adversaries, making him quietly wonder how long he must carry the heavy burden of everyone's expectations. Returning to his private office, he buries himself in tedious paperwork to escape his existential dread, until his assistant delivers a report about low-level monster attacks threatening some nearby rural villages. This captain decides to turn this into a field training exercise, wondering which recruits to send. Sven's heart hammers against his chest as sheer panic completely takes over his mind, while the girls desperately try to keep their composure despite their shared terror. But Blake remains completely unfazed, casually offering them refreshments while they freak out. Turns out, the entire academy is preparing for a massive joint expedition with the elite 1st Division, prompting our protagonist to casually mention his extensive monster-slaying experience like it is nothing, which instantly boosts his students' confidence as they realize how much they have grown. Unfortunately, a group of arrogant classmates immediately starts mocking them for being nervous dropouts, sending Sven into a defensive rage right before the commanding officers order everyone to fall in line. This massive crowd of students quickly organizes themselves into a neat, disciplined formation, as the legendary red-haired Captain Lancelot makes his grand entrance to address the recruits. He outlines their 2-week journey to eliminate dozens of low-level monsters threatening a nearby village, eliciting a thunderous, unified response from the eager crowd of young mages. And with a sharp command from the lead officer, the grand expedition officially begins. Carriages and rows of students march out of the safety of the city gates, embarking on a grueling trek through a harsh, barren canyon under the blazing sun. After 6 continuous hours of marching without a single rest, Sven and the girls are completely exhausted, while the rest of the recruits complain about the steep, punishing terrain. Relief finally arrives when a loud voice announces a much-needed 30-minute break, allowing our tired trio to instantly collapse onto the rocky ground to catch their breath, only for an angry upperclassman to suddenly storm over and aggressively demand what they are doing. Instead of letting them rest, the senior mages order the exhausted rookies to serve the squad, forcing Sven and the girls to give them massages while they complain about their aching shoulders. And, as the night sky settles over the canyon, the grueling march continues without any sleep, leaving our tired trio on guard duty while the rest of the squad gets to rest. 7 days of this relentless torture pass, leaving the young rookies looking like absolute zombies, with Sven genuinely convinced that he is going to die from sheer sleep deprivation, while the dark-haired girl reaches her absolute breaking point under the constant physical strain. Even the quiet silver-haired girl can barely keep her heavy, exhausted eyelids open. Yet Blake strolls up looking completely refreshed, offering them water like he just woke up from a nap, casually explaining that he survived much worse during his years of isolation in the demon realm. This ridiculous explanation prompts Sven to remind the girls that their mentor is not a normal human, before he notices that all the other trainees have mysteriously vanished from the camp. Suddenly, two arrogant seniors grab Sven, mockingly praising them for not running away like the others, instantly turning their toxic attention to Blake, sneering at his special recommendation into the academy, demanding to know how a middle-aged barrier mage managed to worm his way into their elite ranks. Sven immediately snaps, furiously shouting that Blake earned his spot and is incredibly powerful, which only angers the bullies who crack their knuckles to teach the disrespectful rookies a lesson. But before a fight can break out, the legendary red-haired Captain Lancelot suddenly steps in, sending the terrified bullies scrambling away with pathetic excuses to avoid getting in trouble. Lancelot calmly warns Blake to avoid causing trouble, leaving our protagonist to politely thank him for intervening. Lancelot quietly studies Blake, wondering if this seemingly average mage is secretly hiding some monstrous power. 2 weeks of grueling travel finally pass, bringing the entire expedition to a heavily damaged border village. Inside the local town hall, the terrified elders explain that nearby settlements are constantly being raided by monsters, desperately begging the royal mages to hunt down the beasts before their own homes are completely destroyed. Listening to their desperate pleas, Lancelot remains completely silent while analyzing the suspicious details of their story, while Sven and the exhausted girls finally get a moment to rest their aching bodies outside. Just as Blake cheerfully returns from his scouting duty to apologize for leaving them behind, suddenly, an officer calls for a mandatory meeting, ordering all the squad leaders to gather immediately, where Lancelot bluntly reveals to his officers that the village chief is actually lying to them, pointing out that the lack of young women suggests the villagers are already being blackmailed by monsters. This brilliant deduction instantly sends his loyal subordinates into a frenzy of absolute praise and admiration, prompting the captain to order a strict ban on local food while planning a midnight ambush, which the sycophantic officers eagerly accept without a single second of critical thought or hesitation. But before Lancelot can finalize the defensive plan, a quiet voice suddenly interrupts the confident meeting, leaving the entire room of elite mages turning around in absolute shock and utter confusion, as Blake politely raises his hand to ask if he can share his own perspective. This arrogant senior officers immediately explode in anger, furiously screaming at the rookie to know his place. But Lancelot quickly shuts them down, demanding they show some respect to their fellow mage. He steps forward to face our protagonist, genuinely curious to hear what the mysterious rookie has to say, allowing Blake to calmly explain that a passive defense will only get the captured hostages killed. When the senior mages mockingly ask if he plans to search until bedtime, Blake calmly nods in agreement, prompting the bullies to scoff that finding the monsters in such a short time is completely impossible. But our protagonist just smiles warmly, introducing his special detection barrier technique to solve their little problem, leaving the arrogant seniors completely baffled as he gathers glowing blue particles directly in his palm, explaining how dispersing his barrier into tiny particles allows him to map out any physical shape it touches, which means he can easily track the movements of monsters, humans, or literally anything with a physical form. Absolutely losing his mind, a furious senior grabs Blake's collar and screams that he is a dirty liar. But our hero simply closes his eyes, instantly activating his detection magic to prove them wrong, casually pointing out that the two recruits behind him are currently yawning and drinking water. This precise deduction leaves the bullies sweating in sheer disbelief, accusing him of plotting with his students, until Captain Lancelot suddenly steps in, officially assigning Blake's squad to locate the monster lair and rescue the hostages. This captain secretly figures that even if these rookies fail, it won't hurt their main assault force anyway, ordering all squads to prepare for a coordinated midnight ambush as the soldiers salute in unison. Under the glowing light of a full moon, our rookie team quietly sneaks into the dark, dense forest. Sven can barely contain his excitement, thrilled that the legendary captain actually entrusted them with such a vital mission, though the dark-haired girl quickly ruins his mood by pointing out they were likely sent as disposable bait. Blake cheerfully turns back to reassure them, confirming he can easily locate the beasts if they move around a bit, prompting Sven to laugh in relief, admitting he is no longer surprised by his mentor's ridiculous cheat codes. Watching him walk ahead, the quiet silver-haired girl silently marvels at how incredibly versatile his barrier magic truly is, her cheeks flushing bright red as she realizes her heart starts racing whenever she is close to him. Under the cover of darkness, the quiet border village settles into a deceptively peaceful silence, with the exhausted academy recruits finally getting some much-needed sleep inside their carriages, completely unaware of the deadly threat creeping toward the main camp from the shadows. Inside his private quarters, Captain Lancelot rests peacefully after a long day of planning, but a group of stealthy lizardmen suddenly slip through the window with daggers drawn, surrounding the sleeping captain's bed as they prepare to execute a silent, coordinated assassination. Without hesitation, the cold-blooded beasts plunge their blades down to finish him off, only for a brilliant green barrier to instantly shatter their weapons and blow them back, revealing that Lancelot was fully awake and ready for their pathetic little sneak attack. Massive explosions suddenly rock the entire village as the rest of the monster horde strikes, prompting the arrogant senior mages to quickly counterattack while boasting about how easy this is, until a massive, terrifying shadow looms over them from the dark forest behind, unleashing a terrifying squad of high-level orcs with glowing red eyes ready to smash them. One massive beast raises a heavy wooden club, completely bypassing their weak magical defenses, and with a single brutal swing it sends the screaming senior flying through the air. Trapped and utterly defenseless, the terrified bullies can only cower on the ground in absolute horror, before a sudden, overwhelming torrent of fire incinerates the monsters in a single flashy blast. Lancelot steps forward like an absolute boss, effortlessly channeling his legendary flame magic to save them, calmly asking the trembling survivors where the rest of the enemy forces are hiding. This relieved seniors stammer their thanks, only to freeze as they notice something even more shocking. Looming over the battlefield is a massive level 6 orc lord, radiating pure malice, sending the arrogant senior mages into an absolute state of sweating, hysterical panic, but they quickly remember they have the legendary Captain Lancelot on their side. Leaping high into the night sky, the captain channels a massive dual-element spell, preparing to unleash a devastating attack that will completely wipe out the threat. A blinding torrent of concentrated fire and energy rains down from above, engulfing the terrified Orc Lord and his minions in a sea of white-hot flames, completely vaporizing the entire monster horde in one single glorious display of power. Nothing remains of the beasts except a massive smoking crater in the ground. Landing gracefully back on his feet, the captain barely even breaks a sweat, prompting his sycophantic squad members to instantly cheer and chant his name. Yet Lancelot remains deeply suspicious, realizing these monsters are far too organized to be acting alone, when suddenly a chilling presence in the air makes him freeze in shock. Meanwhile, deep inside a dark and damp cave on the other side of the forest, Blake and his rookie squad successfully locate the missing village women tied up on the floor. This silver-haired girl gently reassures the crying hostages that their nightmare is finally over. But our protagonist's detection barrier suddenly picks up a massive threat moving outside, forcing him to leave the rescue to Sven while he runs off to investigate. Back at the camp, Lancelot stares up in absolute disbelief as a terrifying voice mocks him, revealing a colossal armor-clad demon general named Barbarossa looming directly over the captain. This terrified senior mages estimate the beast is at least level 7 or 8. But the colossal monster swings its massive blade down while mocking the captain's pathetic strength. Realizing he is dangerously low on mana, Lancelot desperately calculates his final high-level spell. Meanwhile, his clueless subordinates keep cheering blindly, convinced their legendary leader will easily win. Refusing to accept defeat, the captain forces himself to stand tall against the overwhelming pressure, only to freeze in sheer panic as a devastating strike rushes directly toward his face. A massive explosion instantly consumes the battlefield, kicking up a blinding cloud of dust and debris, leaving the arrogant seniors crying like babies as they scream for their fallen captain. Looming over the smoke, the giant beast raises its heavy axe to deliver the final blow, unleashing a devastating shockwave that threatens to completely obliterate what remains of the area. Suddenly, the monster's glowing purple eyes widen in pure confusion as its weapon hits a solid wall, sweating profusely as it realizes its ultimate strike has been completely stopped in its tracks. Turns out our boy Blake arrived just in time, casually holding up a glowing blue shield, effortlessly blocking the colossal axe with his signature hexagonal barrier like it is nothing. This ridiculous display of power leaves the watching mages absolutely speechless and questioning reality. Ignoring the giant, Blake turns to the battered captain and politely offers to heal his wounds, releasing a beautiful shower of glowing blue and green particles directly from his palms, which instantly wraps around Lancelot, leaving the legendary commander staring in absolute wide-eyed shock. He silently wonders if this is holy magic, unable to comprehend how a barrier mage can heal, prompting Blake to explain that it is just a specialized barrier technique designed to stimulate regeneration. Furious at being completely ignored, the giant demon general roars in absolute vein-popping rage, swinging his massive weapon down to crush the annoying pests once and for all. But Lancelot quickly asks Blake if they actually stand a chance at winning this fight, explaining that his ultimate spell requires a significant amount of time to charge up, which prompts our protagonist to casually offer to create the perfect opening for him, confidently declaring that he will take the offensive instead of just playing defense. This bold claim leaves the captain completely baffled, wondering how a barrier mage can possibly fight. But Blake simply claps his hands together, gathering a dense concentration of glowing blue mana, wrapping the magical energy tightly around his legs to boost his physical speed, crouched low to the ground as he prepares to launch a high-speed assault. channeling a swirling vortex of highly pressurized energy directly beneath his feet, before rocketing forward like a bullet, leaving a trail of blinding light behind him, encasing his entire body in a solid diamond-shaped barrier to act as a battering ram, catching the colossal demon general completely off guard as he realizes what is coming. With a deafening crash, Blake slams directly into the beast with absolute bone-shattering force, sending the massive armor-clad monster flying backward to crash heavily onto the dirt, leaving the watching senior mages screaming in sheer disbelief at this ridiculous display of power. Though the furious giant quickly struggles back to his feet, roaring in absolute humiliation, only to find our protagonist already standing right in front of him with glowing eyes, unleashing a devastating upward strike that launches the massive beast straight into the sky. Blake yells for the captain to strike, giving him the perfect opening to unleash his ultimate spell, summoning every last drop of his mana as Lancelot channels a massive blazing torrent of elemental energy, which immediately gets the useless senior mages cheering like they actually contributed to the fight, as a blinding beam of pure destruction rains down from the sky, completely engulfing the giant demon general, who can only roar in agony as the sheer heat vaporizes his heavy armor, triggering a massive explosion that completely shakes the entire forest to its very core. When the smoke finally clears, the colossal beast lies charred and defeated on the ruined ground, prompting the cowardly seniors to instantly celebrate, taking credit for a victory they didn't earn. But the exhausted captain is barely standing, huffing heavily as his mana pool runs completely dry, with his knees buckling under the immense strain as he begins to fall toward the dirt, only for a steady hand to suddenly reach out and catch him just in time, revealing our boy Blake is right there to support the legendary commander with a warm smile. He casually compliments the captain's spell, acting like they didn't just survive a literal boss fight, while Lancelot looks back with genuine respect, quietly acknowledging the rookie's insane contribution to their victory, until the sycophantic mages crowd around them, loudly chanting that their captain is absolutely invincible, before immediately turning on Blake, accusing the rookie of trying to steal all the glory. But Lancelot quickly shuts them down, admitting he would have been completely doomed without him, prompting our humble protagonist to just smile, casually suggesting that the legendary captain might have won anyway, leaving the commander staring in absolute shock at the kid's maturity and lack of ego, as Blake gently reminds everyone that even the strongest heroes are human and need help sometimes. Blake calmly explains that comrades are meant to stand together and lift each other up, but an angry senior immediately grabs his collar, accusing him of insulting their captain, only for our protagonist to effortlessly catch the bully's wrist with a firm grip, quietly explaining that he knows exactly how terrifying it is to fight completely alone, reminding them that nobody is perfect and even the legendary captain has a human heart. Squeezing just hard enough to make the senior scream, Blake casually releases his grip, leaving the embarrassed bullies to quickly scurry away while nursing their bruised egos, as Lancelot sighs softly in the background, deeply impressed by the rookie's incredible maturity. Sometime later, Sven and the rest of the squad successfully bring the hostages back, reuniting the weeping village women with their families in a wave of absolute relief, while the tearful village chief immediately drops to his knees, begging Lancelot for forgiveness. And though this crisis is resolved, the mysterious demon general's true origin remains a mystery. Back at the academy, Sven cheers loudly, thrilled to finally survive their first real mission, while the exhausted girls grumble about never wanting to go on another expedition again, until Lancelot suddenly calls out to Blake, politely asking if they can speak in private, leading them to a quiet, cozy tavern tucked away in the city streets. Inside, the captain awkwardly apologizes for the sudden invite, hoping he didn't cause any inconvenience. But Blake just smiles warmly, admitting he is actually happy to get invited out, prompting Lancelot to look down and quietly admit that he feels the exact same way, blushing slightly as he confesses that this is actually his first time inviting a friend. Lancelot chuckles softly, realizing they are both completely new to this whole friendship thing, while Blake happily agrees, glad to see the legendary captain finally letting his guard down, prompting the commander to suggest they drop all formal titles since they are officially off duty, which our protagonist eagerly accepts, raising his wooden mug to initiate a proper celebration, as Lancelot raises his own drink to toast their shared bond as kindred spirits, with Blake adding a toast to their shared flaws, embracing their imperfect human nature. Clinking their heavy mugs together, the two newly minted friends share a hearty cheer, spending the rest of the night laughing and sharing stories over drinks and food, completely forgetting about the stress of their duties as they enjoy each other's company, leaving Blake with a genuine warm smile on his face after a long time. This next morning, bright sunlight washes over the bustling streets of the Grand Academy city. Walking through the lively crowd, Lancelot stretches his arms out with a relaxed, happy grin, thoroughly enjoying a rare day off to simply wander around the town completely by himself, reflecting on how chaotic his life has been before finding this peaceful moment of quiet, silently acknowledging that he owes his current peaceful life to the legendary hero Alice. Suddenly, a mysterious person wearing a bright blue cloak comes sprinting through the busy plaza, just as Lancelot resolves to find a way to properly thank his savior someday, only for the cloaked runner to suddenly lose her balance and crash directly into him, stumbling backward as she bows repeatedly and frantically apologizes for her clumsy mistake. But as Lancelot turns to check if she is all right, he freezes in absolute shock, Reacting instantly, Blake grabs the cloak girl's wrist to keep her from falling over, quickly pulling her into a quiet alleyway before the guards can spot them, while the armored soldiers run past, frantically shouting to see if anyone has found her. They yell to keep searching the area, completely unaware of the duo hiding nearby, allowing the mysterious runaway to finally let out a soft sigh of relief. She looks up and apologizes for dragging him into this, complaining about her persistent pursuers, prompting Blake to smile as he asks if it really is her under that hood, revealing the legendary hero Alice, who blushes slightly as she looks back at him. Waving cheerfully, she greets him, mentioning she heard all about his incredible new achievements, though Blake humbly downplays his success before asking why she is being chased like a criminal. With a mischievous grin, the legendary hero prepares to make a shocking confession, proudly declaring that she is currently running away from her massive workload. Her endless duties include attending celebrations, meeting nobles, and signing stacks of paperwork, which leaves Blake absolutely speechless as he realizes the sheer scale of her daily misery. Alice clutches her head in pure panic, complaining that they are literally working her to death, before winking playfully as she declares she does not care about the consequences anymore. Seeing her so incredibly stressed out, Blake realizes she desperately needs a change of pace, quietly calling out her name to get her attention as she continues to grumble, and casually asks if she would like to hang out with him for the day, offering to properly thank her for saving his life back then with a warm, genuine smile. Hearing his sudden invitation, the legendary hero blushes deeply in absolute surprise, before immediately cheering with a bright, joyful smile as she happily accepts his offer, leading them to a breathtaking, secluded meadow hidden far away from the bustling city. Blake marvels at the peaceful landscape, while Alice explains this is her favorite secret hideout, reassuring him that he is a very special guest who is always welcome here. Suddenly, she reaches into her leather pouch to pull out a surprise for him, proudly presenting two homemade wooden lunchboxes with an incredibly excited expression on her face, revealing some massive, perfectly stacked sandwiches inside that look absolutely mouthwatering and delicious, as they sit down together on the soft grass to enjoy their meal, though our protagonist gets a bit confused about why she prepared two whole boxes, prompting a flustered Alice to quickly change the subject and tell him to dig in. Taking a big bite, Blake is instantly blown away by the incredible flavor, warmly praising her culinary skills while she admits to being surprisingly domestic for a hero, but he gently reassures her that having normal hobbies is not weird at all. Softening her expression, Alice looks down as she begins to share her past, reflecting on the quiet life she lived before her sudden rise to legendary status. She explains that she was once just a normal girl in a rundown village, spending her days doing simple housework without possessing a single drop of magical power, until a fateful day when a divine light shone down on her in church, receiving a holy blessing from the goddess Altria that changed her destiny forever. Alice explains that receiving a divine revelation meant she had to undergo brutal training to defeat the Demon King, pushing her body to the absolute limit despite never having fought a day in her life, showing Lancelot her hands that were once covered in painful blisters from swinging a heavy sword. Listening quietly, the captain can only offer a soft, understanding nod to her painful past. Suddenly, she brightens up, proudly boasting about how quickly she mastered swordsmanship once she got the hang of it, flashing a dazzling smile as she wonders if she is just naturally gifted at fighting, which Lancelot readily agrees with, acknowledging that her insane strength definitely required some serious innate talent. She admits that the journey was incredibly lonely with very few allies by her side. Yet she kept pushing forward until she finally managed to strike down the Demon King, celebrating the fact that peace has finally returned and everyone can live happily now. Even so, she quietly reminds him that she is still burdened with the title of hero, prompting Lancelot to suddenly look up with a deeply serious expression on his face, reminding her that he spent 30 years as a simple barrier mage left behind by the times. Alice gets completely flustered by his sudden shift in tone, wondering if he is just joking around. But the captain stands firm, explaining that even someone like him has core beliefs to uphold. Looking directly into her eyes, he softly confesses his deep desire to protect her, explaining that his lifelong duty of maintaining barriers was always about keeping people safe, including her. Blushing furiously, the legendary hero asks why he would want to protect the strongest human alive. Lancelot gently replies that her legendary title does not change who she truly is. To him, she is simply a kind, hardworking, and absolutely wonderful girl who deserves happiness. Hearing his incredibly kind words, Alice looks down with a soft, appreciative smile, thanking Blake for his comfort while admitting she was just feeling a bit frustrated. And seeing her bright, cheerful expression return, our protagonist quietly nods in relief. Sometime later, the two walk back to the city streets where she happily thanks him, waving goodbye as she runs off while promising to hang out with him again soon. Watching her leave, Blake is completely unaware of a sinister presence lurking in the shadows, which turns out to be the disgraced senior bully muttering curses under his breath, his mind completely consumed by a murderous rage directed entirely at our protagonist. Meanwhile, inside a grand office, the arrogant senior gasps in absolute horror and disbelief, as a high-ranking official calmly delivers the news of his immediate transfer to the borderlands, which is nothing short of a career-ending demotion for the proud nobleman. Slamming his hands down, the furious mage demands to know what the official is thinking, only to be reminded of his constant misconduct and the trouble he caused in the training unit, leaving his superior completely exhausted from constantly covering up his endless mistakes. Refusing to accept this, the bully grabs the man's collar, boasting about his noble status, but the official aggressively slaps his hand away, declaring that their alliance is officially over. Screaming in betrayal, the blonde noble accuses his former partner of throwing him away, though the official simply scoffs, deeply regretting ever teaming up with such a foolish idiot. Turning his back, the man coldly orders him to start over in the harsh borderlands. This desperate noble can only reach out in vain as his entire future crumbles away. Screaming in absolute disbelief, the blonde noble refuses to accept that his connections are completely gone, throwing a massive tantrum as he violently kicks the furniture and curses his terrible luck. But things only get worse when he stumbles out into the hallway looking completely disheveled, earning nothing but mockery and gossip from the onlookers who are thrilled by his downfall. Snapping under the intense humiliation, the disgraced noble screams at them to shut their mouths, unleashing a violent burst of fire magic to blast away anyone daring to laugh at him. This reckless stunt lands him right outside the massive gates of the Academy City. A furious official coldly delivers the final blow by firing him on the spot. Desperately pleading on his knees, the former noble tries to use his high status as leverage, only to be reminded that he should actually be locked up in a dark prison. Left completely abandoned on the cobblestone street, he desperately screams that the country still needs him. This massive wooden gate slams shut right in his face with a heavy thud, leaving him to wallow in self-pity while the local citizens whisper about his pathetic state. Suddenly, a dark realization washes over him as he mutters to himself in the dirt, his face twisting into a psychotic grin as he remembers the one person who understands him. Reflecting on the fateful day he fell in love with the legendary hero Alice at first sight. Determined to win her over, he aimed for the captain position to fight beside her. Believing his noble charm would easily win her heart, he stood there smiling. Instead, she completely ignored his existence and ran right past him without a single glance. She ran straight into Blake's arms instead, cementing the bully's eternal hatred for our protagonist. This disgraced noble grinds his teeth in absolute fury, blaming Blake for ruining his entire life. Throwing on a dark cloak, he sneaks back into the city to search for the legendary hero. Unaware of his creepy muttering, the passing citizens quickly steer clear of this suspicious hooded weirdo. His eyes are completely bloodshot and hollow, driven forward by nothing but pure, unhinged obsession. Suddenly, he spots Alice laughing happily in the distance while chatting with our protagonist. A sickening smile creeps across his face as he prepares to run over to her. But he freezes in absolute shock when he notices how close they actually are, sending his fragile mind spiraling into a dark abyss of jealousy and disbelief. Watching Blake smile so warmly at the girl he desperately wanted for himself, this disgraced noble can only watch from the shadows as his dreams crumble to dust. Clenching his fists, he desperately asks why the universe is treating him so unfairly, since he firmly believes that he was destined to stand by her side all along. But that beautiful fantasy is instantly shattered into a million pieces right before his eyes, ruining his delusional plans of marrying the legendary hero and securing his high noble status. Back in reality, Alice happily waves goodbye to Blake before running off to handle her duties, leaving the hidden stalker to drown in a sea of murderous thoughts directed at our protagonist. A psychotic grin spreads across his face as he decides to eliminate Blake once and for all, laughing maniacally while claiming that Alice belonged to him from the very beginning. This next morning, a bright sun shines over the bustling courtyard of the Magic Academy, where the students are loudly ordered to line up for their daily training session. Standing in the grand hall, the entire student body gathers for a massive mandatory assembly. Blake and his classmates look around in awe, completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of attendees. On stage, the red-haired instructor announces their upcoming duty of guarding VIPs during the hero's celebration. Tension fills the room as he prepares to read off the official squad assignments, starting off with the guard unit stationed at the main gates of the city. Whispering amongst themselves, Blake's friends assume they will probably end up on simple castle gate duty, but the instructor quickly moves on to the highly coveted escort unit for the legendary hero, which our protagonist casually dismisses, fully expecting to be stuck with boring old patrol shifts, until the speaker wraps up his announcement and rolls up the parchment, leaving Blake to blink in confusion as he senses a sudden shift in the room. Suddenly, dozens of jealous eyes turn around to glare directly at our main trio, prompting the black-haired girl to nervously ask why everyone is suddenly staring at them, while their white-haired teammate looks down in absolute dread as the truth dawns on her, causing the rest of the group to gasp in complete and utter disbelief, as she quietly explains that they are the ones chosen to escort the legendary hero, sending Blake and his friend into a state of pure, unadulterated panic at the news. Immediately, the entire crowd erupts into a chaotic wave of angry whispers and jealous gossip, with several students loudly complaining that assigning mere trainees to the hero must be a mistake. But the instructor shuts them down, revealing it was a personal recommendation from Alice herself, citing their incredible performance during the monster raid, leaving our heroes completely frozen in shock. This instructor explains that Blake earned this honor by defeating Lord Gunther and gaining Alice's trust, prompting the other trainees to begrudgingly admit that the disgraced noble was actually a formidable opponent. But the red-haired speaker raises his hand to silence any further complaints from the crowd, leaving the entire assembly with no choice but to salute and accept their assigned duties. Shortly after, our main trio finds themselves standing inside the breathtaking halls of the inner palace, stopping right in front of the massive golden doors leading to the legendary hero's private quarters. Blake instantly clutches his stomach, admitting that the sheer pressure is making him feel physically sick, though his black-haired teammate quickly scolds him for looking so incredibly pathetic before their big meeting. However, he quickly points out that both of his teammates are shaking like absolute leaves, forcing them to swallow their pride and prepare for the terrifying encounter ahead. Stealing his resolve, our protagonist slowly pushes the heavy doors open to announce their arrival, only to find Alice and Etta standing there with warm, welcoming smiles on their faces. Seeing the legendary figures up close instantly sends the trainees into a state of pure awe, as they bask in the radiant, almost divine presence of the two powerful ladies. But the magical atmosphere is instantly shattered when Lancelot casually greets them from the side. Alice happily steps forward, praising the group for their incredible bravery during the recent monster raid, while Etta playfully winks, adding that she expected nothing less from someone as talented as Blake, leaving his teammates completely flabbergasted as they realize just how close he is with these legends. Once everyone settles down, they gather around the grand tables to discuss their upcoming escort mission, though Blake and his friends still look incredibly stiff and terrified to be sitting there. Alice and Etta warmly tell the group to relax, joking that they won't eat them, but Blake's black-haired teammate can't help but feel incredibly tense as she looks past them, locking eyes with the terrifyingly intense royal guards standing right behind the legendary heroes. Trying to break the ice, Blake casually asks if Alice was the one who recommended them, which she happily confirms, boasting that she already knows his incredible abilities very well. Even the palace staff chime in, admitting how incredibly reassuring it is to have them around. Hearing this, the white-haired girl realizes Blake is far more legendary than she ever imagined, while their orange-haired teammate is completely blown away by the sheer level of respect he commands, leaving the black-haired girl to stare in absolute awe at their friend's massive reputation. Our protagonist simply sits there with a calm smile, completely unfazed by all the high praise. Suddenly, one of the heavily armored guards steps forward to offer a blunt suggestion. Questioning why Blake is saddled with three teammates who look completely out of their depth, he ruthlessly points out that they lack the presence of strong fighters, looking like total novices, suggesting it would be much safer to replace them with highly experienced royal magicians instead. This harsh reality of his words hits hard, forcing the trainees to clench their fists in shame. Looking down, they silently worry that they might actually just be a burden to Blake, though their white-haired teammate refuses to let her doubts completely consume her resolve. Sensing her determination, our protagonist looks back and gives her a reassuring, silent nod. Empowered by his trust, she suddenly stands up and desperately begs for a chance to prove herself, prompting the rest of the trio to rise up and loudly declare their true potential. Smirking at their sudden burst of confidence, the heavily armored guard offers them a direct test. He steps back into the center of the spacious hall to prepare for a quick sparring match. Explaining that the rules are incredibly simple, he challenges them to land just a single clean hit. To make things even more insulting, he confidently promises not to use a single drop of magic. This massive handicap only infuriates the trainees further, making them feel completely looked down upon. Unleashing a coordinated barrage of fire and dark spells, they charge forward with everything they have. But the dust instantly clears to reveal the guard standing perfectly fine while the trio lies defeated. Peering up from the cold stone floor, the orange-haired trainee struggles to comprehend what just happened, realizing that the knight effortlessly slipped through their magical onslaught without breaking a single sweat. This proud guard boasts that his squad was personally trained by the legendary Lady Walburga, leaving the defeated trainees to stare in absolute silence as the weight of his words sinks in. Remembering that Walburga is the legendary vanguard of the heroes' party, the white-haired girl freezes, since the Sword Saint is widely known as an absolute genius with a blade, and is specifically famous for her brutal efficiency when shutting down spellcasters in combat, making it easy for the guard to declare that he cannot trust powerless rookies with this mission. Stepping in to defuse the tension, Blake calmly asks how many days remain until the official ceremony, wondering if the knight will finally acknowledge them if they manage to get stronger by then, which the guard actually agrees to, promising a final evaluation just 3 days before the big event. Turning back to his bruised teammates, our protagonist asks if they are truly ready for this challenge. Determined to prove their worth, the trio loudly declares that they will train hard and definitely pass. Sending them off with warm smiles, Alice and Etta cheer the trainees on as they head out, prompting the nervous trio to pump their fists and loudly vow to make everyone proud, though the skeptical guard watches them leave, highly doubting they can achieve anything in 3 weeks. Unfazed by his doubts, the trainees fire themselves up and promise to survive whatever comes next. Shortly after, the group arrives at the dangerous mecha forest to begin their brutal training camp, which immediately kicks off with a pack of terrifying lizardmen chasing them through the woods, leaving our protagonist to casually float above on a magical platform while cheering them on, reminding his screaming teammates that running away won't help them level up their skills. Pushed to his absolute limit, the orange-haired trainee finally snaps and turns around in pure frustration, unleashing a massive burst of fire magic directly at the monsters charging toward him, creating a spectacular explosion that completely engulfs the battlefield in thick smoke and flames. But the beast effortlessly cuts through the blazing inferno with a single swing of its weapon, forcing the terrified mage to barely dodge a lethal slash by the skin of his teeth, revealing that the high-level monster is completely unharmed and ready to tear them to shreds. Panicking, the girls realize their basic attacks are totally useless and beg Blake for some advice. However, our boy refuses to help, telling them they must devise a strategy on their own. Suddenly, a massive beast sneaks up right behind the defenseless orange-haired trainee, only for a solid magical barrier to suddenly manifest and block the monster's deadly bite. Stepping in, Blake reassures his team that he will always keep them safe from fatal blows, before casting a massive protective shield to give them the confidence to fight back. Realizing they need to be fully prepared, the trainees wonder how they can actually pull this off. Suddenly, the white-haired girl remembers the words of advice their mentor gave them before. Blake had bluntly admitted that he couldn't actually train them in offensive magic, explaining that his expertise lies solely in barrier techniques and basic physical conditioning to help them survive, leaving the orange-haired mage completely lost on how they are supposed to improve. Smiling, our protagonist tells them to simply make the best use of the cards they already hold, which instantly clicks for the duo as they finally understand his brilliant advice. Instead of trying to learn new spells, they focus on enhancing their physical abilities with magic, allowing the black-haired girl to easily dodge a lethal scythe swing from the charging lizard man, while her orange-haired teammate coordinates a massive fire blast to keep the beast at bay. Capitalizing on the distraction, she leaps in with a dark magic spell to blind their foe, before unleashing a devastating burst of dark energy that completely obliterates the high-level monster. Celebrating their first real victory, the team feels a massive surge of confidence returning, as Blake watches them with pride, knowing that true teamwork multiplies their strength exponentially. With their synergy finally locked in, they continue to tear through the forest beasts together, moving on to day 2 where they carry heavy packs up steep mountain cliffs to build stamina. By day 3, our boy personally spars with them to teach them how to read enemy movements, pushing them to understand their own capabilities while effortlessly dodging their coordinated attacks. As the grueling days fly by, the trainees push past their limits through endless, brutal training, until they finally stand before the armored guard 3 days before the ceremony for their re-evaluation. Standing before the elite guard, the trainees confidently declare that their brutal training camp completely changed them. But the skeptical knight merely scoffs at their sudden bravado, dismissing it as nothing but delusion. He warns the rookies that they are about to face a very harsh reality check. Refusing to back down, the orange-haired mage immediately charges up a massive ball of fire magic. His attack lands directly, completely engulfing the armored knight in a spectacular explosion. Yet the veteran effortlessly slices through the flames with a single swing, calling their effort useless. Suddenly, the black-haired girl leaps from the smoke with her dark magic ready to strike. She aims a precise strike at his blind spot, but his reflexes are simply too fast. This allows him to easily counter her attack and send her stumbling backward onto the floor. However, the knight quickly realizes that her movements were far too quick to be normal. He notices the subtle green aura, proving they use magic to drastically enhance their physical conditioning. A faint smirk plays on his face as he begrudgingly respects their clever tactical adjustment. Next, he unleashes a powerful shockwave to keep them from gaining any real momentum. Working in perfect harmony, the girls swiftly dodge the incoming blade with their newly boosted speed. Unfortunately, the sheer intensity of the battle quickly leaves them completely out of breath. Looking perfectly composed, the guard asks if this mediocre display is really the best they can do. Gritting their teeth, the trio shares a silent look and decides to risk it all on one final move. They suddenly blitz forward in unison, scattering around the knight to completely disrupt his guard. Positioning themselves perfectly, they trap him in a coordinated pincer attack from 3 different angles. With their synergy fully unlocked, they prepare to unleash the ultimate magic they perfected during their training. Unleashing their ultimate combined magic, they trigger a massive, blinding explosion right on top of him, which completely shocks the veteran knight as he senses the sheer power of intermediate-level spells, forcing him to desperately swing his blade to deflect the overwhelming magical onslaught, though the sheer force of their coordinated strike still manages to chip away at his heavy armor, leaving him standing in the smoke with a visibly damaged set of gear. Panting heavily, the orange-haired mage grits his teeth in frustration, thinking they completely failed, while Alice watches from the sidelines and declares that the intense sparring match is finally over, as the exhausted trainees slump onto the cold floor, completely drained of their mana. Smiling warmly, Blake steps up to reassure his team, telling them to be proud of their growth. But their moment of defeat is suddenly interrupted as the massive guard slowly walks back over, only to deliver a shocking verdict by bluntly announcing that they have all officially passed. Dumbfounded by his words, the orange-haired mage can barely believe they succeeded despite losing the fight, until the knight simply turns around to show a massive clean tear right through his armor, kneeling down to their eye level to genuinely praise their incredible progress over the last 3 weeks, before offering a rare, warm smile and expressing his absolute confidence in their future success. Stepping forward with a proud grin, Blake happily congratulates his hard-working teammates on their well-deserved victory, prompting the trio to erupt into pure joy as they realize their brutal training actually paid off, hugging each other with tears of relief while celebrating the sweet taste of their hard-earned success. Watching from a distance, Alice and Etta happily note how much they look like a master and his disciples, confident that with Blake's newly strengthened team on guard, the upcoming ceremony will be perfectly safe. While a suspicious hooded man sneaks through the shadows hoping his dark plans go smoothly, this highly anticipated day of the Grand Demon King subjugation ceremony finally arrives in the capital, prompting massive crowds to gather along the streets to cheer for the legendary hero's party, keeping our newly trained rookies on high alert as they scan the overwhelming crowd for threats. Glancing back at the dragon carriage, Blake silently hopes that Alice's companions are doing all right, though the girls quickly distract him by playfully asking to chat during the parade. However, they quickly snap back to reality to focus entirely on their crucial security mission, knowing deep down that they absolutely cannot afford to let a single mistake happen today, especially since the elite commander warned them that the hero's party is actively being targeted, explaining that frequent kidnapping and assassination attempts have been made on their closest aides. This dangerous reality forces the guards to vow to protect the VIPs with their very lives, which is why Blake remains incredibly vigilant while scanning the cheering faces in the audience. Suddenly, a dark presence looms within the crowd as a hooded man glares with pure hatred, gritting his teeth in absolute fury while muttering curses about a worthless piece of trash. Completely losing his mind, the unhinged rogue aggressively shoves his way through the startled spectators, before boldly stepping right onto the parade path to loudly demand that everyone stop immediately. Startled by the sudden disruption, Blake and the girls turn around to see who is interrupting, only for our protagonist to freeze in shock as he recognizes the uninvited guest as Gunther. Without wasting a single second, the heavily armored royal guards spring into action with heavy footsteps, surrounding the crazed intruder with orders to capture him and show absolutely no mercy if he resists. Muttering to himself in a complete daze, Gunther vows to reclaim Alice and eliminate Blake, but a heavily armored royal guard quickly intercepts him and orders him to freeze immediately, only for the unhinged noble to unleash a massive burst of fire magic to keep them away, sending the surrounding crowd into a state of absolute panic as they scramble for safety, while the crazed rogue stands engulfed in flames, terrifying everyone with his dangerous magical power. Suddenly, a mysterious blue-haired mage steps forward to put an end to his fiery rampage, summoning a powerful torrent of water magic from her staff to douse the raging inferno, which completely neutralizes the threat and leaves the entire battlefield dripping wet. Seizing the perfect opportunity, our brave trainees charge straight through the steam to capture the culprit, tackling the screaming noble to the ground before he can cast another destructive spell. Thrashing wildly, the arrogant Gunther demands that these foolish commoners unhand him at once, but they keep him pinned firmly to the stone floor without showing any mercy. Glaring up at Blake and the hero's party, the defeated noble spits out endless curses, before suddenly igniting his own body in a desperate suicidal attempt to take everyone down, screaming that he will burn everything to ashes if he cannot have Alice for himself, as he unleashes a devastating pillar of fire directly toward the defenseless white-haired trainee. She watches the incoming blast in sheer terror, completely frozen as the heat closes in, only for a massive, glowing barrier to suddenly manifest and completely absorb the lethal explosion, leaving the shocked noble to grit his teeth in pure rage as he recognizes his opponent, as Blake stands perfectly calm behind his shield, completely shutting down the pathetic assassination attempt. With the threat neutralized, Blake stands calmly while the guards keep the unhinged noble pinned to the ground, looking down at the pathetic mess as Alice steps forward to ask why he is doing this, prompting Gunther to thrash wildly while screaming at her to ignore Blake and return to his side. Completely lost in his own delusion, the unhinged noble rants about their supposed past love and shared confessions, leaving the white-haired heroine utterly bewildered since they have barely ever spoken a single word to each other. Regardless of her confusion, the delusional rogue continues to wail about their imaginary romance as guards drag him away, screaming for her affection in front of the entire crowd while being forcefully escorted off the parade path. Watching the pathetic display, Etta can only sigh in pity at someone so utterly unable to face reality. Meanwhile, Alice frantically turns to Blake to clear her name, desperately insisting she has never dated anyone, blushing furiously as she explains she was always far too busy with her training to ever find romance. As the murmuring crowd begins to gossip about the dramatic scene, Etta quickly steps up to restore order, calling out to Alice to help her reassure the panicked spectators before a full riot can break out. Together, the girls cheerfully announce that the attacker has been arrested and everyone is perfectly safe now, which instantly relieves the anxious crowd as they loudly praise the incredible competence of the hero's escorts. With the brief disruption resolved, the grand parade finally resumes its journey through the beautifully decorated city streets. Sitting comfortably in the carriage, Alice happily admits that having Blake around makes her feel completely at ease, though our humble protagonist merely smiles and downplays his role, claiming he only set up a simple barrier. Glancing over at the rookies marching alongside them, Alice notes how surprisingly skilled his trainees actually are, which Blake proudly confirms, acknowledging that while others dismiss them as dropouts, he knows they are truly excellent. smiling warmly as he notes that the hardworking trio simply hasn't realized their own incredible potential yet. Sven can barely contain his excitement as he cheers loudly at the grand celebration, which is being held inside a massive glittering banquet hall filled with elite nobles. His teammates immediately tell him to pipe down before he embarrasses them in public, but Blake just laughs it off, reminding them they earned their invitations today. Though the surrounding high society guests still stare at the commoner rookies with clear skepticism, making the young recruits realize just how much they stand out in this crowd. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out to ask if they are enjoying the party, prompting the entire group to turn around and instantly freeze in absolute awe, as Alice and Etta make a grand entrance wearing stunning, elegant formal dresses, looking completely different from their usual battle-worn gear in the best way possible. Even the snobby nobles in the background cannot help but whisper in pure admiration, completely captivated by the breathtaking sight of the two beautiful heroines standing together. Stepping forward with a warm smile, Blake happily compliments them on how gorgeous they look, which immediately makes Alice blush furiously as she shyly twirls her hair, while Etta looks away with a cute pout, quietly thanking him for the praise. Just then, the red-haired commander approaches to commend Blake for his excellent security work, but our humble protagonist deflects the credit, praising his trainees for doing the heavy lifting. Hearing this, Sven instantly lets the praise go to his head and starts bragging, leaving Clara to sigh in exasperation at how quickly her teammate gets cocky, until Blake gently turns to Clara and warmly praises her for her own incredible efforts. Blushing furiously from Blake's sudden compliment, Alice tries to hide her embarrassment, while telling her friend that everyone is simply giving her far too much credit. But Etta quickly shifts her focus to tease Sven about his unexpected new friendship, leaving the two guys to share a proud smile over their hard-earned bond. Meanwhile, the grand banquet hall buzzes with the chatter of elite high society guests, where the hungry rookies happily stuff their faces with delicious party food, completely ignoring the snobby nobles whispering about how out of place they look, though Sven still begins to feel a bit uncomfortable under their judgmental glares. Trying to distract himself, the silver-haired rookie asks Etta about their missing teammates, prompting the blue-haired girl to explain that the others are currently busy elsewhere, reassuring the young rookie that he will definitely get to meet them eventually. Suddenly, the royal orchestra begins playing a beautiful, upbeat melody across the ballroom, drawing Sven's attention as Etta suddenly turns to him with a playful grin, before grabbing his hand and enthusiastically inviting him to join her on the floor, which instantly panics the young rookie since he has never danced a single step, only for the cheerful heroine to pull him along anyway, refusing to take no for an answer. Winking playfully, she reassures him and tells him to just follow her lead, helping him ease his nerves as they lock eyes amidst the swirling music, and before long the pair is spinning gracefully across the glittering ballroom floor, fully lost in the moment as they share a warm, unforgettable dance together. Etta pouts while Clara stands behind her with a completely deadpan expression. Meanwhile, Sven and his teammate happily stuff their faces with the delicious banquet food, until a hand suddenly reaches out to interrupt Etta's quiet moment of snacking, revealing a polite young noble who smoothly asks her for a dance on the floor, and she instantly accepts with a bright, excited smile that lights up her face. As the two spin gracefully, the red-haired commander watches them from a distance, wearing a surprisingly soft and gentle expression that rarely ever shows on his face. Turning to Alice, he quietly remarks on how much she has changed lately, admitting that meeting Blake has somehow managed to change his own perspective as well. She softly agrees, noting that their unique friend truly is a very special person, whose incredible influence seems to naturally touch everyone around him, for better or worse. Their conversation quickly shifts to the captured noble, whom they both pity despite his crimes. Curious about his fate, Alice quietly asks what will happen to the delusional attacker, only to learn that he will most likely face execution for his treasonous actions. Locked away in a dark cell, Gunther sits completely broken and consumed by madness. Hearing this grim news, the white-haired heroine looks down with a heavy heart, but the commander reassures her that she bears absolutely no blame for his obsession. Feeling comforted by his kind words, she offers a small, grateful smile in return. A few days later, the bustling capital finally prepares for the next phase of their journey, as the entire group gathers outside the grand castle gates to board their dragon carriage. Blake and the commander discuss the grueling schedule right after the massive celebration, while Alice cheerfully accepts her duty to report their victory over the Demon King, though our lazy protagonist would honestly prefer staying home to research barrier magic. Before boarding the carriage, the white-haired heroine asks him to keep the capital safe, prompting a reassuring nod from Blake as he promises to handle everything smoothly. Suddenly, Etta steps forward to steal a private moment with her favorite instructor, whispering a sweet request to rely on him again once she finally returns, which earns her a gentle head pat that leaves the watching trainees completely flabbergasted. With their farewells finished, the grand carriage finally rolls out of the castle courtyard, leaving Blake and the red-haired commander to wave them off with warm smiles. This majestic transport quickly fades into the distance as their long journey officially begins. Watching them go, the rookies realize they are truly on their own now. Since the commander quietly notes this is the party's first trip outside the capital, a detail that makes our usually carefree protagonist look unusually serious and pensive. Meanwhile, a dark shadow begins to loom over the quiet peace of the kingdom, deep within the royal dungeon where the delusional noble sits locked behind heavy bars, wearing a terrifyingly wicked grin that suggests his madness is far from over. A week passes by with the bustling capital streets remaining completely calm and peaceful, as the hardworking trainees focus entirely on their studies without any sudden disruptions. But the sinister threat still waits patiently in the dark for the perfect moment. Gunther sits in his dark cell, plotting his next move with a creepy grin, his eyes completely devoid of sanity as he waits for the perfect moment. Several weeks pass by as the trainees continue their intense magic practice in the courtyard, until the instructor finally calls an end to their grueling daily routine. Collapsing from sheer exhaustion, the rookies can barely catch their breath after the workout, prompting Sven to complain about the endless training and demand a real mission, though his teammates are perfectly happy enjoying this peaceful downtime while it lasts. But the hyped-up rookie keeps bragging about how incredibly strong they have become, only for the silver-haired instructor's expression to suddenly turn dead serious in an instant, which immediately kills Sven's excitement and leaves him sweating in pure panic, causing the young rookie to quickly apologize for getting way too carried away. However, the instructor isn't mad at him, quietly muttering that something dangerous is coming. A warning that is instantly proven right as frantic footsteps echo nearby, revealing a panicked guard who screams that a massive wave of miasma is approaching, instantly stunning Sven and the other trainees with the terrifying news of danger. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the top commanders lock eyes with absolute gravity, before leaping high into the air on magic platforms to assess the danger, only to freeze in horror as they witness the sheer scale of the disaster, where a colossal wall of dark purple energy slowly swallows the horizon, sending the terrified citizens below to scream in panic as the nightmare finally arrives. Terrified citizens run for their lives as the toxic purple miasma floods the city streets. A panicked mother desperately pulls her young child along to escape the encroaching darkness, but the little boy suddenly trips and falls flat on the hard stone pavement, leaving his mother with no choice but to shield him with her own body, bracing herself for the worst until a brilliant blue light suddenly pierces through the gloom, forming a perfect protective shield that completely blocks the deadly purple fog from touching them. At that exact moment, a massive pillar of magical energy shoots straight into the sky, rapidly expanding into a colossal dome that wraps around the entire royal capital, forcing the stunned citizens to look up in absolute wonder at the shimmering hexagonal sky. Floating high above the city, the red-haired commander watches in disbelief as the miasma recedes, realizing that Blake has just single-handedly deployed a massive defensive barrier over the capital. Deeply impressed, the commander praises his quick thinking and asks how long it can hold, only for our casual protagonist to nonchalantly reply that it will last a few months, though he admits he had to rush the spell without any proper wide-area formulas. Before they can even celebrate, violent explosions suddenly rip through the streets below them, revealing a group of crazed, hooded mages who are actively summoning destructive fire magic, ruthlessly attacking the innocent civilians while screaming for absolute bloodshed in the streets. Stunned by the horrifying truth, the red-haired commander instantly deduces that a civil war has begun, prompting him to order Blake to hold the barrier while mobilizing all defense squads, before diving straight into the fiery chaos to stop this sudden and coordinated rebellion. Sven and his fellow trainees sprint through the chaotic streets, completely bewildered by the sudden outbreak of violence, while innocent civilians run for their lives from the crazed mages launching deadly fire spells in every direction. But the red-haired commander immediately leaps into action, slicing through the enemy ranks with sharp wind blades, before shouting at his forces to prioritize rescuing the terrified citizens over engaging the hostile rebels. Nearby knights quickly form a defensive line, unleashing their own magic to shield the fleeing crowds from harm, as water mages wash away the incoming flames to keep the surrounding buildings from burning down. Meanwhile, Sven and his teammates take charge of the evacuation, guiding the panicked locals towards safety, only for a group of hostile mages to spot them and launch a surprise fire attack, which the agile rookies barely manage to dodge in the nick of time as explosions rock the pavement, prompting the frustrated enemies to curse their targets and prepare another barrage of destructive spells. Clara easily sidesteps the incoming heat, mocking their slow attacks with a confident smirk on her face, just as their quiet teammate channels a powerful enhancement spell to boost the party's combat capabilities. Feeling the sudden surge of strength, the duo prepares to launch a coordinated counterattack of their own, unleashing a devastating combination of fire and dark magic directly at the unsuspecting rebel mages, triggering a massive explosion that completely overwhelms the enemy and sends them flying back, leaving Sven to brag that this battle is a total breeze compared to their instructor's hellish training. However, their white-haired teammate is still traumatized by those brutal drills, silently remembering how close she came to dying. Their brief moment of relief is cut short as a massive horde of hooded mages suddenly surrounds them, forcing the rookies to stand back to back as they prepare to fight their way out of this overwhelming trap. and with a fierce battle cry, Sven lunges forward to unleash a blazing strike against the endless enemy forces. While her teammates launch their offensive, the quiet, white-haired girl channels her own supportive magic. As Clara prepares to unleash another devastating blast of dark energy with a confident smirk, but a sudden explosion nearby separates them and leaves a terrified child stranded in the flames. This helpless little boy stands completely alone, crying as the chaotic battle rages around him, until the white-haired rookie spots him just as a hostile mage prepares a deadly attack, sending a massive wave of destructive fire magic directly toward the defenseless young child. Without a single second of hesitation, she sprints forward to throw herself into the danger zone, shielding the boy with her own body as the blazing inferno completely engulfs them, leaving Clara to watch in absolute horror as her friend is swallowed by the flames, triggering a massive explosion that completely rocks the entire stone pavement of the street. As the thick black smoke slowly rises, the rookies stare at the devastating aftermath in silence. Sven can barely find his voice, staring in complete disbelief at the sheer scale of destruction, but a glowing blue hexagonal barrier suddenly shines through the dark smoke, completely unharmed. This young rookie looks up in pure amazement, realizing she and the boy are perfectly safe, which instantly brings a massive wave of relief to her terrified teammates watching from afar. Suddenly, identical blue shields begin popping up all over the chaotic battlefield to protect the citizens, leaving the confused locals to look around in wonder as the enemy attacks harmlessly bounce off. Even the red-haired commander stops in his tracks, completely stunned that everyone now has a barrier, until he suddenly realizes there is only one person capable of pulling off such a feat. High above, Blake casually channels his massive magic, having deployed individual barriers for every single citizen. Clara absolutely loses her mind with rage, unleashing a massive blast of dark magic at the attacker, which completely obliterates the hostile rebel mage and sends him flying with a painful scream, allowing Sven and Clara to quickly rush over to check on their white-haired teammate, who happily explains that their lazy instructor's personal barrier kept her and the kid completely safe. While the rookies celebrate this miracle, they wonder if Blake is actually nearby or casting from afar, only to realize that identical blue shields are actively wrapping around every single citizen in sight, leaving the confused locals to stare at their glowing hands in absolute shock and disbelief. Sven and Clara can barely process the sheer scale of this spell, calling their instructor completely insane, as their quiet teammate smiles warmly, silently admiring just how incredible Blake truly is. Meanwhile, the red-haired commander rallies his troops, urging them to use these barriers to push back, but a panicked subordinate warns that the rebel numbers are too high, putting the king in danger, prompting the commander to ask for reinforcements, only to learn that the magic core is completely depleted. He realizes that leaving the streets will abandon the citizens, but reaching the castle will take too long, gritting his teeth in pure frustration as the tactical dilemma weighs heavily on his shoulders. Making a bold decision, the commander orders his men to leave the castle defense to the Night Corps, shouting that Blake will just have to support them and handle the royal palace himself. This subordinate quickly nods in agreement, though he is secretly stunned by this sudden command, wondering if the leadership truly trusts their lazy former captain to protect the entire royal family alone. With a fierce look of determination, the commander prepares to fight, placing all his faith in Blake, just as a massive horde of rebel mages launches a coordinated assault on the castle gates. A panicked guard screams at his men to keep the incoming rebels out of the castle, but a crazed hooded mage simply grins while preparing a massive blast of fire magic, triggering a violent explosion that completely blinds the defending guards in a flash of light. Mocking their helpless targets, the rebels leap away to continue their assault on the palace, only to crash face first into a solid blue hexagonal barrier that suddenly blocks their path, leaving the stunned mages to wonder if the legendary barrier wizard is behind this trap. Looking ahead, they realize a massive wall of magical energy has completely sealed the street, and before they can even react, a sharp sword strike blindsides them from behind, as a determined knight charges through their ranks to take down the distracted rebels. With a serious expression, the blonde warrior stands victorious over the defeated enemy forces, looking up at the sky to offer his sincere gratitude to their lazy former captain, who is currently floating high above the city, completely enveloped in a brilliant blue aura. Blake looks down with absolute calm, completely unbothered by the chaos unfolding below him, even as a barrage of hostile elemental spells suddenly flies directly toward his position, but he casually raises a single hand, effortlessly blocking the incoming attacks with his shield. A massive wave of fire washes over the barrier, failing to leave even a single scratch, proving that no amount of standard magic can pierce through his absolute defense, until a giant stone hand suddenly rises from the shadows directly behind him, catching our protagonist completely off guard as the massive fist tightly grips his leg and drags him down, leaving the powerful mage trapped in a giant rocky grasp. This giant rocky hand slams down with immense force, kicking up a massive cloud of dust, but Blake stands completely unscathed in the middle of the crater, looking totally bored as usual, prompting a hostile voice from the shadows to express sheer annoyance at his absolute defense. Out steps a crazed blonde nobleman wearing dark robes, flanked by a group of loyal rebel mages, and our protagonist instantly recognizes him, calmly asking if this entire rebellion was his doing. which absolutely triggers the villain, who screams at Blake for disrespecting a high-ranking noble. Veins pop on his face as he completely loses his mind, vowing to murder our casual hero. Yet Blake just stands there with a blank stare, waiting for him to finish his tantrum. Realizing his screaming isn't doing anything, the blonde noble suddenly stops to catch his breath, before awkwardly trying to regain his composure, claiming a true gentleman must always remain polite. Our boy casually asks how he even escaped since he was supposed to be locked up in prison, only for the villain to smugly boast about still having plenty of powerful supporters in high places. He laughs maniacally, declaring that there is absolutely no point in talking any further, as a sinister dark mage with a glowing purple aura steps forward to finish the job. Blake simply sighs and asks why he would go to such extreme lengths to start a war, causing the disgraced noble to tremble with pure rage as dark magic swirls around him. This villain points a trembling finger at our protagonist, screaming insults and blaming him for everything, explaining that he was stripped of his rank and brutally exiled to the harsh borderlands, and to make matters worse, Blake apparently stole his beloved Alice from him as well. His bloodshot eyes glare with absolute hatred, screaming that our lazy hero ruined his life by getting in his way. This disgraced noble screams that everything is Blake's fault, pointing a trembling finger in pure rage. But our lazy protagonist just stands there, completely unfazed by the dramatic accusation, casually wondering if this whole mess is just a case of bad karma. While the villain glares with bloodshot eyes, Blake begins to reflect on his own life choices, muttering that he wouldn't even be in this annoying situation if he had lived seriously. This casual self-reflection only makes the disgraced noble's veins pop with absolute fury, especially when Blake casually mentions that Alice never actually considered him her lover anyway. Hearing this brutal truth completely shatters whatever sanity the villain had left, prompting our boy to calmly advise him to stop blaming others for his own failures, which only results in the madman screaming that he will burn Blake to death. Swirling dark purple magic erupts around the noble as he boasts about Blake's depleted mana, while his seasoned rebel mages step forward to back him up with their own spells, leaving the unhinged villain to cackle maniacally at the thought of finally getting his revenge. And with a unified shout, the entire group unleashes their most destructive magic, sending a massive torrent of fire directly toward our seemingly defenseless protagonist. This disgraced noble's face contorts with pure malice, convinced that his victory is absolutely guaranteed, as his loyal followers pour even more destructive energy into their coordinated assault, creating a blinding inferno that completely swallows the street where Blake is standing, only for our boy to effortlessly block the entire blast with a single glowing blue barrier. Completely losing his mind, the desperate villain screams at his men to pump out even more magic. Standing calmly inside his shield, Blake watches as the rebel mages prepare their next coordinated strike, while the unhinged noble completely loses his mind, screaming for his men to finally end our hero, prompting a massive torrent of combined elemental magic to surge forward with terrifying speed, as waves of fire, wind, and lightning merge into one giant chaotic blast of destruction. Yet Blake just stands there, completely unbothered as the multicolored spells crash harmlessly against his barrier, casually raising a single hand to maintain his absolute defense without breaking a single sweat, which causes the massive magical explosion to harmlessly dissipate into the air around him. But the sheer force of the continuous onslaught actually begins to crack his perfect shield. With a sharp shattering sound, the glowing blue barrier suddenly breaks apart into glittering magical shards, leaving our usually bored protagonist exposed and momentarily caught off guard by their raw power. Seeing this rare opening, the crazed villain shrieks in pure delight, ordering another immediate strike, sending a second wave of deadly elemental magic directly toward the defenseless instructor, only for Blake to easily leap high into the air, effortlessly dodging the incoming barrage of spells. A massive explosion rocks the street below him, completely obliterating the stone pavement in his wake, forcing the shocked rebels to panic as they realize their target has completely vanished from sight, though the desperate noble quickly spots him, screaming for his mages to keep firing upward, where Blake calmly floats above the chaotic battlefield, looking down at the raging flames below. This villain cackles maniacally, shouting that our hero has finally run out of places to hide, with a massive wall of fire rising to trap the floating mage high in the sky, until he simply smiles, quietly channeling a brilliant sphere of blue magic to end this fight. Blake shapes his magical energy into a sharp defensive wedge as he dives back down, using his reinforced shield to slice right through the massive sea of raging fire, and crashing heavily onto the stone pavement below in a spectacular burst of light. Emerging from the thick smoke, our lazy hero looks completely unfazed and ready for round two, which only prompts the unhinged noble to smugly ask if the battle is already over. This villain points out that maintaining barriers across the entire capital severely limits Blake's power, cackling that protecting those worthless citizens will ultimately be the very thing that kills him. But our protagonist simply stares back with absolute calm, completely unfazed by the dramatic threat, quietly explaining that those very citizens are actually the reason he can fight so freely. Hearing this wholesome response only makes the disgraced noble grit his teeth in pure disgust, screaming at Blake to shut up with that incredibly righteous and hypocritical garbage, as he orders his mages to launch another massive coordinated blast of destructive fire magic. However, the villain's smug expression instantly vanishes when he realizes the attack completely missed, leaving him to stare in absolute shock as Blake effortlessly maneuvers through the smoke. With blinding speed, our overpowered instructor charges directly toward the group of stunned rebel mages, unleashing a powerful shockwave of blue energy that sends them flying in all directions, shattering the villain's confidence as his elite guards are effortlessly swatted away. Within seconds, the entire rebel squad lies defeated on the ground in absolute ruin, forcing the trembling villain to sweat profusely while wondering what kind of monster he is facing. He finally realizes Blake is using a legendary mobile barrier technique to completely dominate the battlefield. Blake calmly explains that barrier techniques actually come in many different varieties, ranging from highly aggressive offensive types that can crush opponents in battle to standard defensive shields meant to block even the most destructive magic. And as his hand begins to glow with a brilliant green light, our boy casually reveals his incredibly rare and specialized healing barrier technique. This completely breaks the unhinged noble, who screams in absolute disbelief at the display, pointing out that barriers are only for defense while only holy magic can heal, demanding to know how a mere barrier wizard is pulling off such impossible feats. This kid just taps his chin, looking genuinely puzzled by the villain's dramatic meltdown, casually suggesting that he can do it simply because he trained really hard, which only triggers the madman further, prompting him to scream in pure rage. But before the rebels can even react, Blake moves with blinding speed, effortlessly sweeping through their remaining ranks in a single, highly coordinated strike. Sweating profusely, the disgraced noble watches in sheer terror as his forces crumble, leaving him standing completely alone on the ruined street with no backup left. And our lazy hero calmly points out that the fight is basically over, stepping forward with a cool, glowing blue aura completely enveloping his body, as he casually asks the desperate villain why he doesn't just surrender. Instead of giving up, the unhinged noble suddenly begins to cackle maniacally, reaching into his robes to pull out a glowing purple crystal as his final trump card. Without a second thought, the unhinged noble shoves the glowing purple crystal straight down his throat, swallowing the dangerous artifact whole as dark magical energy begins to surge through his veins, which immediately erupts into a massive pillar of chaotic purple light that shakes the entire street. Watching this desperate transformation, Blake narrows his eyes, realizing things are about to get messy, while the disgraced noble's face contorts with veins popping from the sheer overflow of power. A sinister, fanged grin spreads across his face as the dark corruption completely takes over, leaving him to loudly boast that this newfound strength makes him absolutely invincible, before unhingedly screaming that he originally saved this trump card to use on Alice herself. He cackles maniacally, declaring that even the legendary hero will soon bow down to his might. But our calm protagonist simply charges his blue mana, refusing to let this madness continue. Infuriated by the defiance, the villain gathers a massive sphere of dark energy above his head, unleashing a devastating torrent of purple magic directly toward our seemingly cornered hero, who effortlessly deploys a hexagonal blue barrier to absorb the brunt of the explosive impact. This sheer pressure shatters his shield, forcing Blake to quickly redirect the remaining chaotic energy, resulting in a massive explosion that completely lights up the surrounding city skyline. Refusing to back down, the unhinged noble immediately conjures another giant sphere of dark magic, throwing yet another relentless wave of destructive purple flames down upon his opponent, prompting our overpowered instructor to raise his trusty defensive barrier once again to block it, though the continuous shockwaves keep cracking his shields and pushing his magical limits, culminating in a second blinding blast that threatens to reduce the entire district to ash. Blake maneuvers through the air, using his remaining shield fragments to deflect the incoming heat, but the unhinged noble just keeps spamming massive purple energy blasts in absolute desperation, forcing our boy to pull off some seriously impressive acrobatics to dodge the chaotic explosions, while the villain continues to mock him, completely convinced that our hero is finally done for. Gathering a massive amount of corrupted mana, the madman prepares his ultimate finishing move, screaming that this is the absolute end as a giant dark vortex forms above him, and with a deafening roar, he unleashes the entire blast directly onto Blake's position. Yet as the smoke clears, our favorite instructor is still standing inside his cracked barrier, prompting the delusional noble to laugh hysterically, thinking his opponent is on death's door. Ready to deliver the final blow, the villain conjures even more elemental magic to finish him, only to suddenly freeze in absolute shock as an unexpected interruption catches him off guard, as a sudden burst of magic crashes down to disrupt his ultimate spell. Turns out, Blake's loyal students have finally arrived on the scene, shouting to check on him, with the white-haired girl proudly announcing that they have successfully defeated all the remaining rebels. She passionately cheers him on, telling him to fight with everything he has got. This wholesome teamwork only infuriates the villain further, making him vow to kill them all together. But our protagonist's gaze suddenly turns incredibly cold as his eyes glow with serious power, leaving the trembling noble to sweat profusely, realizing he might have pushed things too far. Suddenly, a massive glowing blue barrier begins to expand rapidly across the entire capital city, while the students stare in absolute awe at the sheer scale of their instructor's power. This students stare up in absolute awe as the massive blue light envelops the entire capital, while Blake stands at the center of a towering pillar of pure, radiant mana, unleashing a swirling vortex of energy that completely dominates the sky above them. Shielding their eyes from the blinding gale, the other students can barely comprehend this level of power, prompting the white-haired girl to silently pray for her lazy instructor's ultimate victory. Enveloped in a brilliant blue aura, our protagonist prepares to finally put an end to this chaos, which only drives the corrupted noble into another screaming fit of pure, unadulterated denial, as he unleashes a massive swirling vortex of dark purple magic directly at his opponent. A terrifying explosion of corrupted energy completely swallows Blake's position in a flash of light, leaving the delusional villain to cackle hysterically, thinking he has finally secured his victory. But a calm footstep echoing through the clearing instantly shatters his short-lived celebration. Emerging from the dissipating smoke, our overpowered hero looks completely pristine and utterly bored, which causes the villain's face to twist in absolute horror at the impossible sight. Refusing to accept reality, the madman desperately spams another massive barrage of dark elemental spells, only for the chaotic purple blast to crash harmlessly against Blake's invisible absolute defense. This unhinged noble screams in pure frustration, demanding to know how top-tier magic is being blocked so easily, but Blake simply raises a single finger, quietly channeling a concentrated sphere of blue mana, and with a sudden flash, a hexagonal barrier cube instantly traps the screaming villain inside. Trapped like a rat, the corrupted noble desperately bangs against the walls, begging to be let out, until the cube erupts with crackling blue energy, completely vaporizing his dark power once and for all. With a final flash of light, the corrupted noble's ultimate transformation is completely undone, leaving him face down on the pavement while muttering about how impossibly versatile Blake's magic is, as he desperately asks what kind of cheat code barrier magic even is. Our cool protagonist simply looks down, casually explaining that barriers are meant to protect everyone, which only makes the defeated villain realize his entire master plan was a total joke, before he finally loses consciousness and collapses onto the cold stone floor. Right on cue, the dark purple miasma completely vanishes, revealing a beautiful blue sky overhead, and as Blake takes a breath, a familiar voice suddenly calls out to him. Turns out his students are running over to celebrate their lazy instructor's big victory. Suddenly, the white-haired girl dashes past her classmates with incredible speed, leaving them completely behind. Throwing her arms around Blake in a massive emotional hug while cheering for him, he warmly pats her head, thanking her with a rare, surprisingly genuine smile. This other students can only watch in absolute shock at her sudden display of affection, prompting a heavily blushing Clara to quickly back away and apologize for losing her cool. But the wholesome moment is interrupted when the red-haired mage approaches to check on Blake, holding up a creepy, glowing purple totem that was recovered from the defeated noble, explaining that this cursed artifact was likely the source of the city's toxic miasma. This triggers Blake to recall the villain mentioning a mysterious mastermind backing his rebellion. Connecting the dots, the red-haired mage points out that all these recent disasters are linked, leaving them to wonder if this was just a coincidence or something far more sinister. With the crisis in the royal capital finally averted, the red-haired mage takes a moment to debrief, offering a warm smile and extending his hand to thank our overpowered protagonist for saving everyone, which leads to a firm handshake while the rest of the students watch on proudly. Fast forward several weeks later, and the king himself makes a grand announcement from his throne, officially appointing our lazy hero as the kingdom's brand new court barrier mage in a massive ceremony. This unprecedented move sends shockwaves through the noble crowd, though nobody can deny his legendary achievements, prompting his loyal students to burst into enthusiastic applause for their favorite overpowered instructor, while the red-haired mage and his close allies join in on the wholesome celebration. But our reluctant hero is currently having a massive internal crisis about his sudden promotion. Walking through the palace halls, he still can't believe he actually landed a real government job, until the gray-haired knight and the blue-haired girl lead him toward a set of double doors, pushing him out onto a massive balcony to make his official debut to the public. Blake is completely flabbergasted by the sheer size of the crowd waiting to see their savior, leaving the energetic knight to enthusiastically cheer him on and demand that he wave to them. So our socially awkward protagonist reluctantly raises a hand, sweating profusely under the intense spotlight. This ecstatic citizens erupt into wild cheers, chanting his name and praising his incredible barrier magic. Though the instant he gets some privacy, he collapses onto a luxurious couch completely drained. Staring around his massive new quarters, he marvels at the absurd perks of being a court magician. He fondly recalls all the warm congratulations from his friends who insisted this was only natural, and looking up at the ornate ceiling, he finally starts to believe in his own useless magic. Looking up at his fancy new ceiling, Blake wonders what his next move should actually be. Knowing that barrier magic is constantly looked down upon, he sympathizes with other struggling mages. Suddenly, he resolves to prove to the entire world that barriers are meant to protect people. Clenching his fist, our boy decides to gather and train a new generation of barrier users. This way, they can work together to protect innocent lives all across the globe. It marks the true beginning of the legendary middle-aged mage who will change the world. Meanwhile, a dark purple curse mark suddenly begins to burn on the legendary hero's chest, leaving a crying Alice to desperately beg Blake to save her from this agonizing torment.